Thank you for attending tonight anyway for the workshop. This is probably I think our 6th Eventbrite workshop online. My name's Tony Kelly. We're going to hear a little bit more about my story as we go along. So why do we do education awareness and prevention? So I'm just going to give you a few little stats. So 50% of the UK adults gamble. We've got 60,000 plus 11 to 16-year-old problem gamblers, UK, approximately 400,000 gambling addicts. And if you think about the financial side of it, over 15 billion spent in 2019 on gambling. So our model is all about, and our vision is all about educating people from young in terms of early intervention. So that's what we base our model on. And I think that if we can continue to do that, not just Redcar, but others, then eventually we're going to get to a point where, we've got a massive reduction in problem gamblers, which is what we want going forward. So my story is quite long. Some of you will know it, some of you won't. So the next slide, I'm just going to give you a little overview of where I was and where I am today. Yeah, so this is a very, very short video. And this will just give you an insight into my story and how I went through gambling addiction and where I am today in terms of what I'm doing with Red Card.
My name's Tony Kelly. I am founder of Redcar Gambling Support Project. I'm also an ex-professional footballer and I'm also author of my book Red Card, which is basically my battle with gambling addiction throughout my life and throughout my football career. I'm now running the project to raise awareness and education and prevention of gambling addiction for adults and particularly for young people. It's something I'm passionate about, stemming from my own lived experience and from my professional football career. So that's what I'm doing today, and that's what I'll continue to do going forward. So related to professional football has been around a long, long time. So in my day, there was issues such as, or scenarios such as when we're playing away from home or staying in a hotel or traveling on a coach, we would gamble, playing cards, and the players would lose a lot of money. And obviously we did finish training quite early them days, and maybe 12:30, 1 o'clock. So there was always that point of boredom. Some would go and play snooker, some would go to the pub, and unfortunately some would get into gambling and be in the bookies all day. So there was a lot of spare time, and then obviously the amount of money that was being earned them days, as is today, with more money comes more risk. And so yeah, that's why professional sports people are particularly getting involved in gambling in a big way today. So it's grown over the last 10-15 years, obviously with the promotion and advertising of gambling, which is absolutely rife and constant. So now it's almost come to epidemic proportions. So now we have a problem with young people gambling and ruining their lives, i.e. Students losing their grant student loans, going to their parents asking for more money. And then the whole of society, it ruins lives, it links to other health issues such as mental health and depression, and homelessness and crime. So there's a big realm of issues that are all connected to gambling addiction, and I think we have to look at the bigger picture.
And I think that's what it is. That last comment there is about looking at the bigger picture. This is my football background, so I suffered gambling addiction throughout my 9 years as a professional, but my gambling started when I was young, from 18 years old. And I know that for many, that's the journey where it starts from a young age. Obviously things have changed since the late 80s and 90s in terms of accessibility, but now we have saturation with online gambling. So obviously a lot more people are getting involved in gambling addiction. So just basic rules. We got rid of the gremlins, thank God. Yeah, so we can move on with normal people. Yes, so just we'll have a conversation as we go along. We will have a Q&A at the end, but I like to engage people, and then basically I just want us to be open and honest about any opinion you've got, any thoughts you've got, and any topics that we touch upon. Yeah, most important thing, be kind to Winston, me. Okay, so this is some key takeaways. Some of the risk factors may include poor mental health, poor general health, family history, BAME populations, We've got more awareness of different types of gambling, which we'll talk about. The recovery toolkit is very important in terms of prevention, which is towards the end of the workshop. And as it says there at the top, which is really important, gambling harm affects both gamblers and affected others. And I think that's something to really remember from this workshop and other workshops you might attend in the future. You know, it's not just about the individual. Gambling addiction affects families and friends, work colleagues, etc. So yeah, it's absolutely huge to remember that. So why did I first start gambling? Now, there's a lot of various reasons why some people start gambling. The psychologists and therapists, etc. Some will say that, you know, majority may have had trauma in their life, childhood trauma, wherever that may be. I personally had a perfect childhood, no issues whatsoever. But 18-year-olds and going into that first bookmakers in Dulwich Hamlet, when I was playing for Dulwich Hamlet Football Club, that was a start for me. And the reason being, as it says in the second point there, was for me was a bit of peer pressure. I wanted to fit in terms of being part of a group. There was 5 or 6 of the players that had football bets on the accumulator, Mecca bookmakers, I'll never forget it, in Dulwich. Yeah, and I wanted to fit in with that so-called clique, what we call, and that was the start for me. I then moved on. That was about football betting, but then I moved on to the horse racing. My ex used to work in a bookmakers, believe it or not, and that was another introduction to horse racing. And then from there it was casinos and FOBTs. But when we look at the curiosity side of it, yes, young people are curious about gambling. Obviously, we're going to talk more about the advertising and promotion later. But you know, every gambler will tell you that there is an excitement about gambling. There is a buzz that you get from it. You know, we will talk later about the dopamine, etc., the chemical released from the brain that for pleasurable activities. And it does, once that dopamine rush gets you and you're in that grip of addiction, the excitement and buzz is still there. You know, you are excited about, are you going to win the next day? Is your number going to come up on the roulette table, etc. So yeah, that element will always be there. Fitting in, as I said, for me, and obviously for most people, not all people, but majority of people, is financial gain. So we look at different possible other motivations for gambling. So gambling to make money or gambling for the chance of winning big money. Yeah, we have recreation motives related to filling time, hobbies, pastimes, and fun and relaxation. Competition. And that's important. Gambling, the challenge, you know, you go down the pub, you play snooker with your mates, whoever, you might bet a tenner, etc. And then you've got social gambling, either to be sociable or because it's something that one does with friends and family. And then the bottom one is probably the most important one, coping. And a lot of people, you know, you'll hear throughout the workshop how people, you know, use gambling as a coping mechanism. Gambling to relieve tension and stress, problems at home, problems at work, etc. So yeah, coping mechanism is a massive one for motivation. And then you've got defining gambling. Now, there's obviously lots of different variations generally, but generally this is defining gambling, generally defined as a risk in money or something of value in a game or bets. Gambling is an extreme example of risk and reward relationship, game of chance with desired outcome. That's the general definition of gambling. The warning signs, we talk about the gambling addiction. You've heard it said before that it's a silent addiction, you know, in terms of, you know, there's not many visible signs, but you know, there are emotional signs and there are some visible signs which we will come on to. But emotional signs such as overcoming social isolation by visiting betting shops or casinos. As I said earlier, the rush of adrenaline and dopamine, which is a massive issue. Feeling numb, stressed, depressed, unpleasant feelings and problems which cannot be easily resolved. Again, trying to deal with your problems, personal problems and getting depressed, etc. Boredom, as in the times we're in now, we're in a pandemic and people are at home, stuck in their rooms, bored out of their head, and that can lead to gambling. Desire to pass the time and relax and wind down after a stressful day. The visible signs. So preoccupation with gambling, the loss of interest in other aspects of life, such as family responsibilities, and focusing on gambling. And that's something I struggled with in terms of neglecting family, not focusing. In my case, it was my football career. So I lost 5 years to the game, finishing at 30. And that's because I was preoccupied with gambling. It sort of basically eventually took over my whole life. And that's what it does to a gambling addict. It actually takes over your whole life and your self-being. Sudden increased personal funds, yeah, it could be a visible sign. Serious loss of weight, again. neglect of, eating properly, varying mood swings, anger, stress, depressed, quiet, etc. And that's an obvious trait of a gambling addict. Your mood will change from time to time. If you've had a bad day in the casino, you've had a bad day in the bookies, ultimately you're going to come home to family, and that's where the dynamics of the family are getting affected, because your mood swings will change from day to day. Increasing the amount of money used to gamble in order to pay lost bets, chasing losses, common theme for the gambler, always chasing losses. And it's, people say, oh, when you've had a win, etc., or you might be up for the day, why don't you just stop, etc. But unfortunately, you go for more, and then you'll end up losing money, and you'll be chasing losses and basically digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. Isolation, withdrawn, another characteristic of a gambler. For me, the isolation side would be, I'd like to be on my own a lot of the times, not really want to go out and engage with people and friends, cancelling engagements, that kind of thing, because you do tend to become withdrawn. And then different gambling harm. This is interesting. Harming gamblers can be stratified into 3 groups. So when we talk about gambling harm, there is obviously different levels of gambling harm. So when we're looking at these 3 levels of gambling harm, generally speaking, low risk gambling harm, it will have few or no negative consequences. So it could be, going for a drink, getting hammered on a weekend, coming home, but not really having major consequences. You might miss work the next day, you might have a headache the next day, etc. And then we go to moderate risk, which is similar severity to drug dependency. And this is where intervention needs to come into play, because you'll start to spend more money on gambling, you'll start to borrow money for gambling, you'll start to become preoccupied with gambling. So now you're having some serious consequences to your gambling. And this is done, as I said, this is where intervention needs to come in to stop you spiraling out of control, and basically spiral into becoming a problem gambler, which is ultimately what you will become once you go through these 2 stages. Problem gambler harm is similar to severity manifestation of alcoholism. So there are different, as we said before, there are different levels of gambling harm. So now, for you guys, types of gambling, which 2 are not considered gambling by the Gambling Commission? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing, and have a little think, have a look at that, and have a little think about which 2 you think at the present moment in time are not considered gambling by the Gambling Commission. Who wants to have a dig? Go on, Terry. Unmute yourself.
I'll have a go for loot boxes and spread betting.
Good lad. Good lad.
Is there a price?
Yes, they are the 2. No, you don't. They are the 2 that are not recognised by the Gambling Commission. Would anyone like to comment on to why they're not considered gambling by the Gambling Commission? You okay? Let's go back to the screen. So we're going to go on to loot boxes shortly, but spread betting and loot boxes are, there's the 2 answers. Spread betting is generally because it's a completely different form of gambling. It's all about the financial market. It's about commodities and shares, etc. So it's not considered by the Gambling Commission because it's basically regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Loot boxes is something that, in terms of the Gambling Commission, because there's not a monetary reward, they see it as not gambling. But we know, well, some of us know that, there's an element of risk and reward, there's chance, there's money spent. So that is something that's being consulted on in terms of the banning of loot boxes. So we don't know what's going to happen in the next few months, but it's a massive issue, loot boxes. And so just to go more deeper into detail about loot boxes, I'm going to show you a short video, which will give you a bit more explanation about what loot boxes are and what they mean.
With the summer holidays just around the corner, there is a high likelihood that children and young people in your home might be spending a little bit more time playing those popular games such as Apex Legends or Fortnite. Now, it's likely that you've probably heard the term before, skins. Dad, this cool, amazing skin is now available and it's only available for 24 hours. And guess what? I need your wallet and I need to buy it now, because if I don't buy it now, it's gonna be gone. Anyways, if you've got a Fortnite battler in the house, you've probably been manipulated at some point to fork out for the latest cool Fortnite skin. So a skin within the popular game Fortnite is a graphic which changes the accessories or the look of a particular character within the Fortnite game. Now, the important information about skins is, contrary to some gamers' belief, the skins don't actually improve the performance of the character within the game. So what is skin betting or gambling, and what do parents and guardians need to know about? So in popular games such as Fortnite, some skins can be earned within the game, and some game platforms do let players trade these particular skins. There are a number of websites now in existence which do allow players the ability to gamble with their skins and earn more valuable skins to play within games. Skins themselves have become a form of virtual currency with a potential cash value. Skins themselves can even be used to bet on casino-style gambling websites. Skins can also be exchanged for virtual coins, which can be used on gambling websites. And on these websites, there is no age verification in place, and children can gamble skins which have been purchased. Loot boxes and mystery chests are another form of skin gambling. This is where players spend real money to buy hidden items within the game which they are playing. Just to give you an idea of the scale, the number of skins gambled last year alone exceeded 10 billion. While gaming is fun, it is important that children and young people aren't taken advantage of while playing games online. 90% of 13 to 18-year-olds are gaming online. According to Parents Zone report last year, 30% know about skin gambling. And of the children who know about it, 36% have gambled with skin. So when it comes to skin gambling, what do parents need to be on the lookout for? Be on the lookout for the Steam platform, which is designed to buy, sell, and trade skins. There are also a ton of other websites that do exist, which are also used to exchange skins for virtual or real currency. Importantly to note, popular streaming gaming platform Twitch has now outlawed skin gambling. Pocket money and personal funds dwindling can be an indication of skin gambling. So I hope you found this short video useful today. If you're watching.
So the important thing about skins, in my opinion, to remember is that, you know, as we said, it's not recognized as gambling in terms of the Gambling Commission. So, but when you listen to that and you look at this graphic, for instance, so skins can be bought while playing a game. Yeah, as you explained, those skins can be kept in an online wallet, which is basically like a mini bank account. That online wallet can be moved to a new website where you can play gambling games. And this is what he was talking about when we're talking about unregulated websites, because there's a lot of unregulated websites where you can trade your skins, no age verification, etc. Those skins can be used to place bets. And again, we're talking about, you know, general gambling games such as casinos, and those skins can be something exchanged for real money. So when we put all that in context, you got young people out there that are spending thousands and thousands of pounds on skins betting, on Fortnite, on FIFA. You know, FIFA being another example of spending money in terms of buying the FIFA packs. FIFA packs can go up to anything up to 16, 17 pounds. So you imagine if a young child, 13, 14-year-old wants to get the best player, for instance, a Messi or Ronaldo, you know, it's that repetitive behavior and the familiarization with gambling that they're going to continue and keep spending those money on those packs, to then eventually, in the hope of where the risk and reward element comes in, for the hope that they're going to get a Messi or Ronaldo, etc. And the cosmetic characters and the skins betting, again, same thing. They want to get the best character, and that's where the risk and reward comes in again with the loot box, because the thing with the loot box, you don't know what you're going to get. So you'll spend money, you'll purchase money, purchase an item, sorry, with money on the hope that you may get the weapon that you want, etc. For instance, in Fortnite, but you'll continue to do that until you do, and that's where the element of gambling comes into particular skins betting and virtual gaming. So it's something that, you know, I think personally needs to be clarified as gambling. We don't know what's happening in the future, but in my opinion, yeah, definitely just finish off on the skins and betting, because it's important, some information for parents and adults. So 500,000 13-17-year-olds participate in some form of virtual gaming in the UK. Fortnite and FIFA are among the most common. Most parents are totally unaware of this form of gambling. Kids gamble their skins on casino-style games such as roulette, as I said earlier, leads to familiarization of gambling and grooming for adult mainstream gambling. Now, it's not the case that every single child that does virtual gaming or plays FIFA or Fortnite, that is going to, you know, lead on to mainstream gambling in their adulthood, but the potential's there. Loot boxes in game purchase risk and reward, as I said, they use parents' debit cards, and that's where the age verification comes into play. Other forms of payment methods, and again, unlicensed regulation and no robust age verification. So it's a serious issue, virtual gaming and Fortnite and FIFA and all these games, because, you know, there are, as it says here, thousands and thousands of young people that are getting addicted to this style of gambling. Okay, types of gambling which are legal for 16-year-olds. Have a little look, have a little think, get your brains working. We'll see if you can get the prize. There isn't a prize really. This is a little bit trickier, I think. Who's going to get the prize? Colin.
Lottery definitely is, but I think it's only until, is it the end of this month?
It's, is it October or is it April? Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I went past the post office today and there was a sign outside that I've not seen before that said,
I think it's from
end of this month.
October. You can't actually, I think from October you can't actually buy a lottery ticket. Yeah, you have to be 18. Yeah, that's one.
Loot boxes, obviously.
I'll
let somebody else do over two.
No, you got to go for four, mate.
All right, okay. I can't remember what they were now. Private. Private, because there's no regulation.
Private, yeah. Three. Private, three, yeah. One more.
I am really struggling to remember what we're on list now.
Arcades, I reckon, too.
Arcade, yes.
Arcades.
Yeah, who said that?
Me.
Who? I'm looking at the screen. Who said it?
Terry said it, but I tried to claim credit.
All right, yeah. He's unmuted, that's why. He's muted me. Yes, so loot boxes, private game machines, lottery, yeah. And as you can see, the next slide, there you go. Yeah, so they're the types. Now, this next short video, this will be your third video of the night. You've got one more. I love videos. This next one is our friends at National Citizen Service. Now, this is a group of young lads. Now, what I'd like you to do after this video is to come up with something that you think is directly, linked to video in terms of gambling addiction, in terms of impact. It could be anything. So watch the video, it's 3 minutes, and look at what you can take out of this video in terms of education, in terms of awareness, in terms of prevention, all those things, gambling harm. And yeah, we'll have a little chat after, because I've got 10 things that I wrote down. Okay.
Play games of chance for money, bet.
Last year, it's estimated that £10 billion was spent on gambling. 48% of men and 42% of women have gambled in the last month, and usually half of those who suffer from a gambling addiction will end up committing a crime in order to feed their addiction.
We decided to ask members of the public their knowledge on gambling and the dangers of it.
Not really, no.
God, no, I don't actually, no. Yeah. Are they like a friend, a family member, an ex-partner? Lots and lots of
It's addictive.
Yeah.
When you start doing it, you
to get used to it and
Well over 1 million. 5% of the population. 10.
quite a lot. It is a lot.
This is a role play that shows the impacts of gambling on teenagers and how teens start at an early age.
So guys, what we thinking about betting today? I'm probably gonna, just maybe we'll bet on my headphones and then the signed card. Nicolina?
I have £3.
Okay, but you do have more money, so you can give it later.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, before
Yeah.
bag or pocket. Yeah, okay. Jamal.
Everything.
Go on, Jamal. Everything. Let's go. Okay, I'm gonna start because obviously I won. No surprise. Sorry about this one, Nicolina, but I'm gonna have to reverse it on you.
Oh, sorry.
What?
I'm out. I have no more
We
cards.
just started.
Yeah, I know. You guys can split the £3 between yourselves.
Okay, yeah, I gave my headphones.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay, that's cool, yeah.
There you go. You guys can
Yeah, we'll just go to the corner shop and split this after, right? Yeah, let's go. So we go for round 2. What are we thinking? I'm thinking maybe like my chip bag or...
Which one of you took money?
Wait, what?
Which one of you took money?
Wait, there was no one else in the room.
It's no joke.
Jamal, are you... Look, I'm going to laugh at you right now. I know you're angry, but I'm
Yeah, there was no one else in
the
the room and none of us took it.
Who would take your money? No one would take your money.
Exactly.
Students, what are you doing?
Oh, Miss, we're just playing some card games.
Yeah.
You're gambling. I saw you take that money from him.
No, I didn't.
Whoa.
Yes, you
I
did.
promise, I didn't take the money.
I can see how this is affecting you. You're already stealing. Your grades are dropping. You're showing up late to school. You need to stop this before it gets out of control. It's happened to me. You'll lose everything you've ever had. Your house, your money, your friends and family.
Okay. I did take the £10. I'm sorry. I took it.
I'm really thinking about
Can I get that back
Sorry,
to
yeah.
Research shows 75% of gamblers had an alcohol disorder, 38% had a drug disorder, and 60 were nicotine dependent.
Australians lose more money per capita to gambling than any other nation.
In the UK, it's estimated that approximately 430,000 people are suffering from compulsive disorder.
If you do believe you have a gambling problem or know someone who does, you can call the National Gambling on 0808 8020 133. Visit the National Gambling Treatment Service to find out more, or read The Red Card, The Soccer Star Who Lost It All to Gambling by Tony Kelly. And these are just to name a few.
So that was our friends at NCS who were kind enough to work with us last year, and the kids got to develop a gambling awareness video for us. So when you look at that video, we're talking about different types of impacts. We're talking about what kids may go through if they're gambling between themselves, etc. So I'm going to stop sharing, and if we can just mention what things. So I've got 10 things here, for instance. I'll start off. So I've got anger. So as we know, anger is one of the characteristics of a gambler. What else we got?
It said that his the grades were dropping, sort of education suffering.
Yeah, I've got that. Productivity. Yeah, so the grades are dropping, missing school, etc. Mel, unmute yourself. Yeah.
A detrimental impact on friendships, relationships.
Yeah, I've got that down. Broken friendships. So obviously this group of kids are obviously friends. There's going to be a big fallout the next day. Yeah. Come on, guys, think about it. What did we see in that video? If I've got 10, I'm sure you... Terry?
Yeah, unreported crime. So crime against your friends, relatives, people close to you.
Yeah,
Theft.
the crime I've got down as theft. As you've seen, she stole the £10.
Yeah, deception.
Yeah, I've got down, you could say the same, deceit and lies. Yeah, lying.
Mood swings.
Yeah. Again?
Mood swings. Like he just went. Like
Yeah,
he just snapped. Like,
yeah, they definitely changed their mood swings, definitely, yeah, and that coincided with being angry.
Effects on productivity around school grades and studying and things like that.
I think, who said that a minute ago? Colin, yeah, you're right, Owen, yeah, exactly, productivity. I've got a couple more here, so, and this is towards the end of the workshop, which is really important, coming from the teacher. So obviously she was, we could call that intervention. So the teacher's intervening and letting the kids know exactly what's happened, and she's using her lived experience to educate them, telling them that, you know, what she's been through. She lost obviously everything. Yeah, so we have lived experience, broken friendships, and obviously time. You know, the kids are using time to gamble when obviously you can be using that time for something more constructive. Okay, let's go back to the screen. Now, this is another one for you guys. Yeah, I'll start it off. So this is one of my colleagues. I won't lie, one of my colleagues has helping with this. So we have a little A to I alphabet. So this is about getting you guys to think on a wider scale and on a bigger perspective, broader mind about gambling addiction. So anything that connects to gambling addiction, however, you know, in whatever form you can think of, we've got the A to I alphabet. So I'll start off with A, which is I've got anger. So now we're on to B. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'll show you what the list is afterwards. I want to see if any of your answers match with our alphabet tool list. Go for B. Think about gambling addiction in general. Think about it could be harm, anything to do with gambling addiction. Boredom. I like it. Boredom, yeah.
Borrowing.
That's a who said borrowing? Colin, so that's a match. I'll tell you when there's a match. That's a match. Borrowing. C. Crime. Interesting.
Crime.
Cheating.
Yeah, crime, cheating, definitely, yeah.
What?
I hope we ain't got another gremlin. Anyway, bloody C, crime, cheating, yeah. D.
Deception.
Dopamine.
He matched it.
Deception.
Someone. I didn't think any. Yeah, well done, deception, definitely. I didn't think someone would match D with dopamine, but they have, unfortunately. Yeah, well done. A, B, D, D. We're on E. I'll give you a clue. E was in my second slide, opening slide about why I started gambling.
Excitement.
Yeah. See, at least someone's listening. Thank you. Right.
I'm on Billy. I'm on mute. I keep getting to mute. talking away here.
Yeah. Sort it out, Darren. Anyway, E. Yes, excitement. A, B, C, D, E. We're on F. I can't remember what we put down there. Yeah.
I've got a double bed.
Anyone think of F?
I mean, F has also got the fear of, you know, getting caught out and all the rest of it. So fear a little bit.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. Yeah.
Fighting.
Fighting. Study on Sandra. Fighting. Yeah.
Fun. Might have been fun.
I think that might be it. You know, I think that might be the match. Fun. Yeah, and as we know, that's a term that we all don't like in terms of promoting gambling fun, because as we know, ex-gamblers, it's not fun. F, E, E, F, G. Actually, G is quite straightforward, to be honest with you.
Gaming.
It says what it says on the tin, basically.
Gambling.
Yeah, gambling addiction. Yeah. G. H.
Angry.
H, yeah. I'll give you a clue for the match. Today's workshop is all about gambling. Yes. GH, and the last one, I, which is something I touched upon in terms of what I felt going through my gambling.
Isolation.
Do you know what I would say?
Correct.
Probably not a match, Tony, but I'd say immature as well.
Immature. Give me your thoughts on that.
I mean, when I was doing it, well, for me, when I was gambling 15, 20 years, I was still a child, if you like, in terms of everything about me.
Yeah.
Since I stopped gambling, I just feel myself more as a man now, if you like. Take responsibilities and all the rest of it. And if you're immature, you're not taking responsibilities. So yeah, for me, it's immature.
I think that leads from what we talk about child gamblers in terms of brains not being developed until like 24, etc., around that age. So yeah, immaturity, I suppose, is a big part of child gambling. So yeah, good point. Okay, we finished the alphabet, and there's the alphabet tool. So yes, what do we F, focus. Focus was F. Okay. Chase, yeah, chasing losses, etc. Yeah. Risk factors in gambling. So there's lots of different risk factors. We're just going to go through them quickly, and we'll have a few comments afterwards. So you've got advertising and promotion, which we're going to talk about shortly. And employed, obviously, you know, the need to get more money, the need to get what you want, etc. And employed is a risk factor. Black and Asian. Turn your volume down, please. Black and Asian, other ethnic minority groups, obviously, you know, they are in some cases more vulnerable at risk to gambling addiction, and other reasons as well in terms of demographics, etc. Male. We're going to talk about women gambling shortly, but you know, we've got to get away from this fact that, you know, this is a male gambling industry, a male-dominated industry, which back in the day, yes, in the 80s, 90s, it was, but not so much today. Bad general health status, yeah. Parents who gamble regularly and did have problems with gambling, so we talk about family history. And then they've got low mental health well-being, not feeling relaxed, lack of confidence, feeling love, stress, life events, withdrawn, we talked about earlier. Loss of interest we talked about, because as a gambling addict you do lose interest in absolutely everything. You know, you're in your own little world, so to speak. You're zoned out, you know, you neglect everything, ignore everything in your own little world, so you do lose interest of everything basically. Depression, obviously, when we're talking about mental health, is a major factor of that gambling journey. Other ones, big wins, again, another risk factor. Generally speaking, when people have the first big win, they get that delusional thinking. It's going to happen all the time, and we know it doesn't. We talked about geographical reasons and impulsivity. Now, this is one thing that a gambler, or if you're on that gambling journey, you've started on that gambling journey and you've started to get into problems, this is what you should never, ever do. Now, this is something that I went through, well, every gambler's been through. And, you know, it does start out from borrowing for friends and family, and then it escalates. And we talk about the escalation of gambling. For some, it's gradual, and for some, it can be absolutely rapid. It can happen overnight, you know, a week, 2 weeks. But for majority, it's a gradual thing. And you will exhaust all avenues of borrowing. That is without a shadow of a doubt. That's what a gambling addict does. That's what I do. Everything on here, apart from inheritance, is what I gambled on, right down to logbook loans, using my car. Overdraft, pawnbrokers, a common one. Family and friends, borrowed off every member of my family.
So I'm correct, Tony, to say definitely Omele will confirm there would have been some fighting. Some fights.
Amongst the family. Yeah, amongst the family, yeah. Yeah, I would actually put that down to broken relationships. So yeah, sorry, Sandra. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Luckily for me, I've got, you know, a good support network and a strong family support, but not everybody has that. So when you're burdening your family with your money problems, yeah, again, and they become affected, as we talked about, affected others, all the loans, etc., and credit cards. So this is something when someone, you know, starts on a gambling journey and they're starting to have problems. That's where intervention is paramount, and that's where support and help is needed, because if you don't, then you are going to go through all these avenues of gambling. And at the end of this avenue of gambling, you know, there will be, you know, a place where you get to where it might be committing crime, or it might be ultimately, you know, taking your own life, which is, again, we're going to touch upon shortly. So the next one is a very contentious topic. So what we're going to do, I'm going to take you through 4 or 5 slides. And then what we're going to do, we'll have a discussion about it, because it's very contentious. People have different views about it, not just individuals, but different agencies and bodies. So it's advertising. So, right, here we go. Television advertising. So you've got more than 4 out of 5, age 24, 16, 24, of course, gambling adverts and TV. This is in terms of football, 10 out of 20 Premier League clubs at the moment, 2021 season, sponsored by gambling companies. And also with that, you have 17 of 24 Championship clubs, which are sponsored by gambling companies. So the relationship and the convergence between professional football and gambling is absolutely gone through the roof. They've both seen a gap in the market. It's for profit for both parties. So that's why this is happening. 2/3 reported seeing gambling promotions on their social media. You got 12% 11, 16-year-olds following gambling companies. So again, another form of advertising, social media, YouTube, Instagram, etc. Then you've got gambling account for 11% of all online advertising spend. And if you look at the figure there, which you might not be able to see in the middle, advertising spend, this is 2017, which has gone up, it's 1.5 billion. And then you've got 70% of children and young people notice gambling adverts in the high street, betting shops, window displays, as well as promotions on the shop floors and near tills, etc. So gambling advertising is a massive topic today. You do have certain campaigners out there that will talk about banning gambling advertising completely. And if you look at the gambling advertising in general, so that's in general what's on this screen, and then coupled with that, you've got this. You've got the impact of gambling advertising in football. So when you put it all together, we are absolutely saturated with advertising. I mean, in terms of the football world, people have different views in terms of should there be a ban with sponsorship, gambling sponsorship with football clubs. That might be something that may happen in the coming months. We're talking about kids being exposed to gambling through this method. We talk about, so for instance, if a dad takes his son to football on a Saturday, we have stadia betting, which is basically mini bookmakers within the football grounds. And he might be just, putting his bet on, telling his son, hold on a minute, son, I'm just going to put a little bet on. So straight away there, you've exposed your 12, 13, 40-year-old son to gambling. Kids are inquisitive. They're going to ask about the shirts. They're not allowed to be sold to kids with the advertising on. So, your dad may have a football shirt and say, for instance, don't say, for instance, Bet365, and the kid wonders why his shirt doesn't look like that. So then you're going to get these conversations going. So it's not to say that just because a young person sees, sponsorship on their idol shirt, for instance, that they're automatically going to become, start gambling or going on that gambling journey. That's not the case for everybody. We had someone last week in our workshop last week who was 16, 17, and said it had no impact on him whatsoever. But there is lived experience evidence out there. There are stats out there where people have gone through being exposed to gambling through this form of advertising. And so we know it happens. We absolutely know it happens. At the end of the day, the gambling companies are selling a product which is a harmful product. We can talk about the tobacco industry in terms of that being smoking being banned, and why they will not do that with gambling, for instance, with football and gambling. So it's a really contentious topic. And when you look at the financial side of it, you can't see this, but we've got a list of clubs here. Generally, a contract might be worth £5 million to £15 million to a Premiership club. But, in terms of impact on a Premiership club, it's neither here or there. At the end of the day, they're awash with money. They pay 200 grand a week to players. Whether they lost a contract that's worth £50 million a year, it's not going to have no detrimental effect to their finances. Championship clubs the same. I mean, the income that comes from professional football and gambling sponsorship, the main source of income professional football clubs at the high level, at the top tier, the two top tiers, is from broadcasting rights, commercial deals and ticket sales. So this is not their primary source of income. So it's not, in my opinion, going to affect the two top tier clubs. If you talk about lower league clubs, there isn't a lot of relationship between gambling companies and football clubs in the lower tier of football. Now, before we get onto the discussion slide, our friend, which you will all recognize in a minute, will give you a 3.5-minute video because he has some very valid points, and then I'm going to open up the floor.
There's been an explosion of online gambling during the pandemic. Some people say it's just because of boredom, but could it be more complex than that? And more importantly, Is it even your fault if you are a person that's been caught in a cycle of gambling? At the end of this video, stay tuned. I will give you some solutions and some suggestions if you or someone you love is affected by gambling. And the thing is with gambling, it's a serious problem. 9.2% of people that do online gambling are addicted to it. Plus, problem gamblers are at greater risk of suicide than people with conventional forms of addiction. So really, again, this is the same old problem. It's a business. Gambling is a business. So the fact that it causes addiction and financial ruin in ordinary people is not significant. It's not like I would suggest banning gambling, but these are things that I think are interesting. The gambling industry has a history of donating money to political parties. In 2017, it was revealed that sports and betting companies are the most regular donors to MPs. MPs who defended betting machines in a Commons debate had received thousands of pounds in gifts from bookmakers. How can there ever be political legislative change when the funding comes from the people who benefit from things staying the same? In 2005, UK bookmakers and online betting companies agreed to give, wait for it, 0.1% of their annual 14 billion revenue to charities that fund addiction treatment and research. The industry has increasingly failed to meet its commitments. Data released by Gamble Aware show that some firms ensured their presence on a list of donors by giving as little as £1 or £5. I suppose this is the kind of remorseless, relentless rapaciousness of profit-driven business. Gambling, I suppose, probably could be fun. You know, like in them adverts where it goes, when the fun stops, stop. Do you know what you're dealing with addiction? When the fun stops, stop. If you're going to respond to common sense advice, you're not in the grips of the delirium induced by this condition. So what are offered are phatic and gestural solutions rather than practical solutions designed to make a difference, because the fact is that this industry is dependent on people that are addicted to the product in order to survive. Sports betting's legit over here in England. In America it's banned in some states because it's sort of pretty intoxicating, but if you're like me, someone who watches e.g. football, you're bombarded with invitations to gamble the whole time. But like you could see how you bloody would. I mean, it's just the players are wearing it on their shirts, the adverts are on it, with starring people that you admire and love. You know, it's just like the invitation to do it is, I mean, I suppose, again, it's what's revealed is what's interesting. What's revealed is that everything is an opportunity for profit. Let's have a look at some of these enticing opportunities to gamble. Again, if you're a person without an addiction issue, I don't know, who cares? But some people can't do this, and they are the people that are vulnerable. So the 2 points that I'd like to raise is mostly the advertising should be restricted, and secondly, that the industry should pay for the problems that it generates.
You know what to do.
So there's them intense sexy adverts. Then there's also ones that are kind of, hey, we're your mate.
Lads, and everybody, Chris Ackerbosa. All right!
Sort of ironic lad culture, references to sort of pastiche, parodic, retrograde, nostalgic figures.
Get a bigger payout on your football accumulator by hitting the boost button to boost your Acker odds.
In an attempt to make it accessible and ordinary and humorous, but I find sort of a bit patronising.
Here at Ladbrokes, we want you to stay in control of how you bet and play.
Oh, good. Well, don't design a product then that specifically targets addictive traits in vulnerable people. Is that what you've done?
Simply decide how much you'd like to spend.
Again, I'm not an addict.
Set reminders that help you manage how long you play for, and take a break whenever you want to.
You're in the grips of addiction. I think I might take a break from this crippling addiction.
So however you like to play, stay in control and always gamble responsibly.
It's presented as a sort of a rational, calm medical procedure, but that's not how addiction operates. Here's some actual advice. If you are suffering from gambling addiction, get in touch with Gamblers Anonymous or a comparable 12-step support group. Find somebody else who's had an addiction problem like you that is now living a life free from the addiction, and next time you want to gamble, call them. Remove all apps and devices from your phone. Do not put yourself in situations where you're alone with your phone. For example, stop taking your phone to bed at night. Do not sit alone. Join groups, support groups, even if they're online, where you talk honestly about the feelings you get when you're gambling, what it brings up in you. Talk about the emotional deficiencies and defects you have inside yourself that you're trying to make up up for. What job is the addiction doing in your life? It's providing me excitement, detachment, escape, freedom. Well, you've got to find those things elsewhere in your life. You can't just remove the addiction and replace it with a sterile Ladbrokes ad telling you to take a break. You're going to need to find what this craving, this yearning within you is looking for, which you'll probably find is something quite profound and emotional, and dare I say it, spiritual. You won't be able to do that on your own. You won't be able to do it without significant change. However, help is available, change is possible, and there are groups that are genuinely interested in helping those of us that have addiction issues. If you know somebody that's affected by gambling, you might consider showing them this and letting them know that they're not alone, that there is a solution, that change is possible. These are fundamental principles of recovery in every single area of your life.
So, as I said, contentious topic. My view, you mentioned about restriction of gambling, and that's probably the side of the fence I'm sitting on in terms of campaigns about a blanket ban on advertising, gambling advertising. Restriction, so I would look at the content, I would look at the language used. So as you said earlier, when you're using stupid slogans like "when the fun stops" or "gamble responsibly" or "gamble aware," yeah, I would look at the content of the language in, and also the imagery, because as he said, it's all geared to encouraging people to gamble. We don't ever see any advertising that highlights the risks of gambling. It's all basically perceived as gambling's normal. You know, that's the road they've gone down, that gambling's normal for everybody. So we have to come away from that. The gambling isn't normal for everybody. And gambling advertising, this form of gambling advertising in terms of encouragement, we don't see any imagery or anything that says, you know, gambling's harmful, gambling can take your life, etc. So the football clubs have already mentioned my views on that. I don't think it has a profound effect if the sponsorships were cancelled. So I think it's a question of, for me, the ASA, Advertising Standards Agency, the Gambling Commission, the DCMS, operators all getting together and collaborating together, and basically, in my opinion, the volume of advertising of gambling should be restricted, and the messaging, content and imagery definitely. So there's a balance. So there's a balance between gambling advertising, encouragement of gambling, and gambling harm. So I'll open up the floor to see what we think, because obviously this is something that's in the Gambling Act review, something that's talked about for many months. And as I said before, people have got different views. So what do we think? If anyone wants to start off with their thoughts on gambling advertising or advertising in professional football for young people. Go on, Terry, unmute, mate.
All right, I'll keep it brief, mate, obviously. I mean, what Russell has said there is fantastic, isn't it? It's great that a guy like him has got a awareness of the big picture. As far as I'm concerned on advertising, I think bookmakers have taken the piss out of everybody, and therefore it's time to stop the adverts now, full stop. We probably won't get it, but at least we'll get most of what we want. The safer gambling advertising needs to be improved, because that Ladbrokes one, I mean, like he said, it was so sterile, it's pathetic. So maybe for every, should we say, 5 gambling adverts, there should be one proper safer gambling advert that people like us can get involved with. And the big point for me is all the celebrities and the sports people in advertising. It's just ridiculous. You know, you had Chris Akabusi there that probably wouldn't know what a pound lucky 15 was. He doesn't know what's going on in the world. Peter Crouch doing all the Paddy Power. You've got Jose Mourinho sat in the back of the taxi, Alan Shearer, others I could mention. And it's about time they became ambassadors for real things, not for bookmakers. You know, if they need a few quid, mate, then I'm richer than I think I am.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think the celebrity endorsement of gambling is something that's crept onto our screens in the last few years. And like Terry said, you know, these people, the Alan Shearers, the Rooners of this world, the Marinos of this world, you know, at the end of the day, they're taking whatever fee they take to be associated with a gambling company when they don't need to, really. So I think we got to be careful. Kids do look up to their idols, and if it's all right for Wayne Rooney, it's all right for them. So yeah, very good point, Terry. And I think the balancing of gambling advertising, as you said, for every 5 advert, you might have one advert that really highlights gambling addiction and gambling harm. And I think when I'm talking about highlighting, I'm actually talking about, you know, showing images of, you know, someone over their parents' or son's graveside, someone coming out of jail, all the real impacts that gambling addiction relates to, the impacts that we don't really want to talk about, or that's sort of kept under the carpet, and we need to really talk about it and really get it out there and raise awareness about it. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from in terms of balancing gambling advertising. Yes, Colin?
Yeah, I was going to say, just in relation to safer gambling adverts, actually, on a side note, a total disclaimer, the girl, this is totally but the girl in the Ladbrokes advert with Chris Akabusi, conflict of interest, that's my cousin.
How do you know?
Genuinely. But anyway, by the by. But what I was going to say about the safer gambling adverts, there are safer gambling adverts at the moment. My personal thoughts, they might as well not bother with them as they are, because they're not safe for gambling. The brand awareness is what they are. And that is all they are. You see them, it's you know it's Ladbrokes. Yeah, blah blah blah. You know, when the fun stop, or you know, and all that. Yeah. But it's there. It's in Ladbrokes colours. It's in William Hill colours. It's the logo. It's brand awareness. So whilst, you know, 1 out of every 5 might be a safer gambling advert, the content of it is it. I mean, it is, but like, I totally agree with you in that it should be hard hitting. It should be, you know, the side of a cigarette packet, someone's, you know, lungs absolutely caked up in car and stuff like that. Hard hitting, impactful, because these are, you know, when the fun stops and take a bit of time out and do it. It's tokenistic. It's nonsense.
Yeah, I agree. Some good points, mate. I agree. Anybody? Yes, Mal?
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, what worries me is that gambling in this country, as everyone knows, it's such a massive thing in this country, and it has been for years and years and years. And it's just, I'm trying to work out, it's hard for me to believe that what you were just saying there, which I agree with, you know, safer gambling adverts, hardcore adverts telling the real dangers. You know, like I like to see a little 2-minute advert of somebody talking about how it's ruined their life and lost their money, lost their mortgage, that kind of thing. Really hitting home kind of thing. But I think to myself, you know, will that ever happen? Because it's like there's too much money that's been the government generate that I can't see that happening. Is there a chance of that happening? Something like that, a hard-hitting advert that goes either way.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think that's what I was talking about in terms of you know, the powers that be getting together, and when it comes to decision making, whether that's a DCMS, whether it's an ASA, you know, we don't know, you know, whether that, you know, it will actually happen. For me personally, I can't imagine next few months seeing an advert on TV that, you know, basically portrays what we talk about, what we want to see. And I know it's sad, it's wrong, but hopefully, you know, we might be wrong, and that may happen. Terry? Yes, Terry?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things that came up. Yeah, is it me, Terry Kilgariff, or Terry White?
Terry Kilgariff.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. There's 2 things that stood out on the Russell Brand video for me. The first one being was that you know, the payments to the politicians, and so while that's happening, things are only going to get worse. And you know, this review of the Gambling Act is crucial, and the proof will be in the pudding. However, I look back at the, you know, when I was a manager of a betties for Corals, and in those days, and I don't believe it's changed, you had to have a frontage and you know, a closed door to actually access the betting shop. You go to any football ground now, and they're actually there's not a frontage, and so young people are being exposed where it's illegal for people under 18 to gamble. So in other words, if it was on the street where you went or whoever it might be, then you would automatically be expected to be taken out if you're under 18, or the parents advised to leave them outside the shop. Whereas on all sports stadia, as far as I'm aware, the betting shops are open on the concourse, and so consequently that's breaking the law straight away, and nothing's done about that. Just as the other law Whereas if you put a bet on for somebody under the age of 18, then you're breaking the law, and technically speaking, you could go to jail for 21 months or up to a £10,000 fine. And that law has never been implemented once since it was brought in. So, you know, there is a kind of a turning of the eye, shall we say, to a blind, you know, to a blind man. But the bottom line is, if it was governed more appropriately, and just as with the advertising, there shouldn't be any gambling advertising before the watershed, you know, 9 o'clock at night, whereas it starts at 10 o'clock in the morning, as we know, with This Morning and competitions and bingo and aiming at people who are at home, you know, the demographics that you were talking about before. So, you know, it is a very widespread issue. To ban it would send it underground, but it needs more regulation and it needs more appropriate, you know, it doesn't go hand in hand with other, as has already been mentioned, high profile presentation, you know, with the, you know, your Mourinho's and your Ray Winstons and sort of people put across as, which is what it's meant to be, a safe leisure activity.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. I think the quick point about the stadium. 1 minute, Darren.
Fine.
No, I just want to touch on the point about the stadia betting, because I never really thought about it that way in terms of breaking the law, but that's a fact. The stadia betting is another concern. Yeah. Thanks for that, Terry. Yes, Darren.
I mean, just like what Terry was saying, and about, you know, the advertising, it being the concourse, and all the rest of it. So, as you all know, we're on lockdown now. Well, we were until today, if you like. So Saturday, Grand National, I'm walking past Bookies in town, and all the windows had a big, massive advertisement on about today's Grand National, even though the shop was shut. So it's basically saying something like 6 or 7 places, I don't know, go online, here's the website, free bet and all the rest of it. So it's still advertising in the window, big, massive spreads where children are. And like Terence just said then, you've then got the parents putting it on for the children. So I know for a fact, because I actually spoke to somebody on Sunday about it, how their children both wanted to have a bet on the Grand National. They are 9 and 11. And he did it for them. So what Terence said, it's actually against the law what he's done. But people still don't see the impact what that can cause later on. It's just that really. So the advertising, it's on the football shirts in the stadiums, but also still in the shop windows. Well, I remember in the past, Bookies, they're all not boarded up as such, but you wouldn't really notice the Bookies. Now it's just like Aubrey lit up, posted in the windows, whole lot with footballers, and again, children are attracted to those pictures.
Yeah, I think that's what I was talking about in terms of the volume, because like you said, it's absolutely everywhere. The volume of advertising is something that, you know, I personally would want to see, you know, heavily reduced. When we talk about parents and kids gambling at football stadiums, etc., that's where we have to talk about, you know, personal responsibility from parents. You know, not exposing their kids at football matches to gambling. So the parents have a lot of responsibility as well.
What about
someone's next?
What about you talk about advertising? What about sponsorship? So sponsorships on the shirts. So obviously kids.
Well, that
their shirts can't show it on their kits. So a child has got the wrong kit, and the children know that they want the Cov shirt with Boyle Sports on it, not the shirt without Boyle Sports on it. I mean, to be fair, not many kids want the Cov shirt, but it's the principle.
No, I mentioned that earlier about kids are inquisitive. They were going to wonder why their dad's shirt looks different to theirs. Yeah, totally get it, mate. Yeah. Colin again.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of following on from what Daz said there, something you said before the Russell Brand video. It shows I was listening. You were on about the young person that you spoke to last week that said that the football shirt advertisement had no bearing or impact on him or her.
On him.
Well, while he might believe that, subliminally, I would challenge that on the basis that using stuff like, for example, that person, that young male that said it didn't affect him. He might not bet. He might not have ever had a bet. in his entire life. He might have no intention to bet. But this weekend is a great point to highlight with the Grand National. Loads of people, they don't gamble for 364 days of the year, but they'll have a flutter on the Grand National. Fair enough, each to their own. That young person, if he decided to have a bet, where's his association going to go in terms of subliminal? Talking about like Daz was saying there, nobody wants to buy a Coventry shirt and things like that. As a lad growing up in sort of 80s and stuff like that, I think of Coventry and I think of Peugeot and things like that. I mean, that's forever ago, but I still make that association. And that's the thing, it's the association and the normalisation, the Liverpool of the 80s, Crown Paints and things like that I remember. And the kids nowadays, in 10, 15, 20 years, are going to remember Betway. They're going to remember Bet365. They're going to remember Jose Mourinho in the back of a taxi. It's the association and the normalisation of it as well. It might not directly affect them there and then as they sit and think about it, to ask them that question. Does that affect you? And they will quite legitimately and honestly answer, no, it doesn't. But if they ever wanted to put a bet on, chances are, would they, if they supported, Stoke, who was sponsored by Bet365 or whatever, that's the one that they would go to. And that's what advertising is. That's why it's so cleverly done.
Yeah, and I think
so much.
Yeah, I think that touches upon what someone else mentioned about brand recall. So that would fall in line with that. Yeah. But no, I get that. It's a good point. Ross?
Yeah.
Hi, Ross, mate.
All right. I don't see why there's no reason the government can't kind of stop it all, like they have previously with cigarettes, with alcohol. They've put bans on that sort of stuff, and they've managed to find other ways. Unfortunately, this time it's been with gambling, but they'll surely find other ways and means to make money. So there's no reason why they can't really do that.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that. In terms of operators earn, billions and billions of pounds. And if gambling advertising is restricted or banned, etc., they're still going to make money. Football clubs, I've said already, it's not going to affect them in any way, shape or form. There's going to be other sponsoring contracts that they'll get, just like back in the day with Hitachi and all the rest of it. So yeah, I don't think a gambling ban, a gambling advertising ban, will have a huge effect on the football clubs and on the operators, even though they say it will. I just read an article from the EFL, which I just want to read out to you. So what they're saying, the statement added, with 40 million UK a season paid by the sector to the league and its clubs, the significant contribution betting companies make to ongoing financial sustainability of professional football at all levels is as important now as it's ever been, particularly given the ongoing impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which is leaving many of our clubs living on our financial knife edge. And it's absolutely pathetic. So yeah, that's not the case at all. There's a lot of competition out there that are opposing a gambling ban, a blanket ban on gambling advertising. But yeah, I agree with you, Ross. Yeah, good point. Anybody else?
I'll let Martin.
Martin. Oh, mate. Unmute yourself.
Right, I've got myself unmuted, and maybe we're playing tennis there.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I haven't gone to sleep. It may be legal, but it ain't right. And so I'm certainly firmly in the camp that advertising should go the same way as tobacco advertising. Just to pick off on some points that were made earlier, certainly the safer gambling messages are really phony safer gambling messages, because they're merely brand awareness, absolutely 100%. The same way as the whistle-to-whistle ban is a phony whistle-to-whistle ban, because the ground is plastered with adverts around the pitch side on the shirts in the stands. Somebody mentioned earlier on that the economic argument would be difficult to knock over, but I'm not so sure. If there was a Social Market Foundation report going back 3 or 4 weeks now, which looked at the economics of the betting industry, and basically I think they were showing that if the betting revenue decreased by 10 million or whatever, That would in fact result in more tax to the government, less harm to individuals, and more jobs being created in the displaced sectors that would pick up the spend that wasn't going on gambling. So there is an economic argument there. In terms of the 1.5 billion, that's an absolute tsunami that is normalizing gambling. And any safer gambling message is just swamped by that total volume, which is why it needs to be banned. There is some advertising promoted by Gamble Aware, which for the life of me, I cannot see the logic of, although they've got their own rationale. But I think just to look at the scale of it, their budget for a session of tap out type adverts is about 500,000, and that's just a drop in the ocean compared with the 1.5 billion. And all that happens, even though the adverts don't target the young, they become collateral damage because they can't escape seeing them wherever they look. So ban a lot is where I'm coming from.
No, some really good points, Martin, really good points. Yeah, I think the economic side, yeah, is something that, again, with different diverse views and all that, but yeah, you make some good points, Martin. I think we've time. What? Go on.
Olivia, I think, had her hand up for before me.
This is daughter, I think.
Since
go on,
before
Darren.
me. Whoever. Oh, sorry.
I think he's finished. No, go on, Terence.
No, sorry, my hand was up from earlier. I didn't lower my hand. So,
good spot.
Sorry.
Oh, it's from before. Yeah, Terence.
Yeah. The thing that kind of stands out is that because we've allowed this multi-billion-pound industry to kind of run away with itself, it's lost control of its moral compass. And basically they employ people to work out ways around any kind of restrictions that are aimed to pull in, to have a go at their income. And so they've got to maintain that, and they will pay people phenomenal amounts of money. And the adverts, as we've said, they can blow the government or out the water. So it needs to come from government. It needs to be something that's where at the moment the tail's wagging the dog. And at the moment, we need to get the government with employing, whether it be the Gambling Commission, give them the teeth to do the job that they're meant to be doing, or to create another body that actually brings everything into line, and that people are held to account. At the moment, these companies hide behind blind leaders. And they'll just, they'll hang up a scapegoat if they found out to be doing something wrong, and they'll do it in a different way, or they'll, and some of the lower ones will just change names and, come back as another, because there's so much to be made there that the dodgy people are the ones who are going to make it worse for everybody, and they're the ones who won't even recognize fair gambling. So, the online's the classic example. In comparison to every other form of gambling, the online, is the rest of the iceberg. The rest of it's just the tip of the iceberg, your football stadiums and your betting shops and your casinos. The online is, multi-billion-pound faceted, where, you look at Mr. and Mrs. Cooks, who started Bet365. She's paying herself 249 million last year, and she's legit. So imagine what the ones who are, not quite as conscious, moral compassing. You've got to you've got to realise what you're fighting here, and we're not going to be able to. All we can do is lobby the government. There's only the government can step in and make a major difference here.
Yeah.
And we, as you said at the outset, as Russell Brand said, the politicians are the ones, providing you keep them happy, it's a license to print money at the moment, and that won't change.
Yeah.
And the only way around it, as I see, is what they did in Australia. We need to learn from Australia and bring the kids into it. You know, the kids, the fact that there's 60,000 problem gambling kids in Britain, and the fact that gambling under the age of 18 is illegal, you know, that is what we should be highlighting. And for those of us who saw the advert that they did in Australia, where the kids actually did the advert, you know, it was far more empowering and powerful than the bloody tap it out shit that they paid Saatchi $500,000 to do. You know, it's absolute nonsense. And the only way you're going to change that is by utilizing young people that are as has been outlined here, they're the ones who are being groomed to be the next compulsive gambling disorder generation. So unless we get a grip of that, you know, the superficial surface stuff is just, you know, just trying to keep a monster back with a toilet brush. You know, you're setting yourself up to fail, basically. Just my observations.
Yeah. No, really good points there, Terence. Yeah, I agree. When we really break it down, and we have lots of conversations about it and lots of different views about it, ultimately it will have to come from the powers that be, as I said before, from the government. And and bringing kids into it, is a good way of promoting, a good way of lobbying. And I've seen that video in Australia. Yeah, you're right, Terence. It was very powerful and very interesting, and it relates to affected others as well. Yeah, thanks for that. Go on, Mel.
Yeah,
a couple of things really. I agree with that last comment regarding government. I just think to myself, with regards to betting companies, I think to myself, have they got all the power over the government? Yeah, I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking about the social media in terms of, you know, what's going on with online trolls and racism and all that kind of thing. And then I think to myself, you know, Facebook got the power over the government, so everything nothing's going to change in that Facebook thing, all the troll and racism. It's all crap. Get sick of it. And the same with the gambling thing, nothing's going to change unless the government do something.
Yeah,
it's like these companies are bigger than them. So the only thing I'm thinking is that the government obviously are getting something out of it, or else they do something. Do you understand what I mean? They don't do anything.
They're doing it.
They let the gambling go on. They let the fucking trolls and Facebook go on. You know, because there's something in it for them.
And I think everyone's, you know, not just individuals, but I think campaigners and lobbyers and other agencies, we've all got to a point now where, you know, change is necessary. Hence the review of the Gambling Act, which, you know, so when you're talking about seeing real change and about the government being, you know, control, or the operators being in control, as you said, or the industry, you know, in charge of the government, which obviously, you know, is not the case. Yes, it has to come from the government, and yes, change can only come that way. And like you said, you know, it was 2005, the Gambling Act. We're on a review now, lots of consultations, the same old thing, lots of topics, lots of debate and all that. And as someone said earlier, the proof will be in the pudding in 6 months, 12 months time, whether real change actually happens. Yeah, exactly. Go on, Martin.
Yeah, just briefly on that point, I for one, am very conscious that the gambling industry and betting gaming council has got a tremendously powerful lobby. If you read the 45 questions that came out with a call for evidence, you could almost believe that BGC actually wrote that call for evidence. So I think what we'll get back by way of a consultation document in 6 months' time or whatever will be a fairly limp, half-hearted version at reform. And my only hope for a sensible outcome will be when it hits the floor of Parliament and you get the likes of the all-party parliamentary group on gambling rating harm getting their teeth into it to the same extent they did with the £2 property fees. So I'm very skeptical that DCMS are really looking to do much, and it'll be other backbenchers who force them to do it.
Yeah, good point, Mal. Just going back to your question, Mal, what Martin's just saying then, if you remember the FOBTs, which I'm sure a lot of us here was affected by, The fixed odd better tournament in the bookies, yeah. That was a 5-year, plan in terms of getting the £100 a spin reduced to £2 a spin. And I think what Martin's saying is a similar scenario that we're looking at. It's going to take intervention from people, within, as I said, benches within APPG, the All Parliamentary Group, and others. So yeah, so it's going to be, others that are going to intervene. But yeah, that just proves that change can happen, because I don't think a lot of people thought that £100 would go down to £2. So it can happen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, one more point, if I could, mate.
Yeah. Sorry.
We've got the Euros on the horizon. I know I've spoken with you privately about this. I mean, it's going to be the biggest betting event of all time. And because it's on BBC and ITV, when it's on ITV, the adverts are going to be quite brutal and quite, powerful, and they may even be full of celebrities and ex-footballers. But also what's not talked about a lot, especially for the 14-year-olds, is these Panini football stickers that are already out, because the kids are really, really under pressure to fill every team. So they go around and they're sort of pinching money to get the stickers and all the rest of it. And it's a bit like the loot boxes, it promises you something. And before you know it, they become addicted to something. Okay, it's great at 14 to say I've got a full Panini book, but really at the end of the day, how much will that have cost? Not just in money terms, spiraling those urges, to get something.
No, it's a really, really good point. Yeah, Panini books, and that relates to the FIFA packs, etc. Yeah, really good point. And it is, it is going to be a summer of thousands and thousands of people suffering gambling harm when it comes to these Euros. So yeah, really good point.
I mean, those Panini stickers, again, it's an element of chance, isn't it? It's an element of risk. Again, it's a gamble for children of 9, 10 years old. I mean, you know me, Ted. I'm really passionate about kids not getting into gambling. And I always use my lad as an example. Again, he likes football stickers, mad on Pokemon stickers. It's crazy. It's there. It's constant. And it's normalised and all for children. It's just normalised, and that is the biggest.
That's the word, normalised. Yeah. And hence why we go back to early intervention and early education. Exactly. Okay, we're going to move because the time's going. We've got to. We've got to turn your music down. Don't. We've got a break now, so we'll have a 10-minute coffee break. We'll make it 10 minutes instead of 15. So if we come back at 12 minutes past, and then we can crack on. We will get finished by 1:45, because we did finish at we did start 15 minutes late, but we will finish at 1:45. So just have a 10-minute break, and I'll see you all about 12, 13 minutes past. Cheers, guys.
And you might need to allow me to share screen permission.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, mate. You okay? Oh, God knows, mate.
Hello. Hello. Oh, fucking hell, you bloody idiot.
Martin.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what was you saying about there's an update regarding social justice, Centre for Social Justice?
Yeah, if you check out,
I've seen the report. Yeah, I've seen.
Yeah,
that.
I guess say if you check out the Gambling News Today or something website, they've done a poll, and somebody's published the poll on that. And I think the actual report is due out. In my head, I had it was the 12th, but it may be it's not till next week sometime. So I think within 7 to 10 days, that report, and I assume you've seen a draft as I have, will be published, looking at what they did on some of their previous reports. They tend to bring a full court press on it, so it'll bring another angle to bear on the affordability
checks,
angle and agenda. What they're proposing is not bad, but I'm not sure it's going to be a sinecure. I think affordability needs to be one of the prime duties of the Gambling Commission. What ain't going to happen is the gambling industry ain't going to sort it out themselves. They've been dragging their feet now for over 12, 15 months on the single customer view, which is really where this thing needs to hinge. But they've got the big data, the tools to understand who's playing where and when, and how much of their disposable income they're betting. And they're not interested in behaving responsibly. So it's going to have to be done to them. They ain't going to volunteer to do it themselves.
No, you're right. Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping that the credit reference agency model will come into play.
Yeah, I come from the point of view is that the new Gambling Act ideally has to have prevention of harm as its primary objective. You know, and it'll have a clause similar to the Health and Safety at Work Act, which says thou shalt to do everything reasonably practicable to prevent harm. And then on the back of that, I would like to see the equivalent health and safety executive as a safe gambling executive, probably running in parallel with a gambling ombudsman. So you've got one enforcing failure to undertake to respect a new statutory duty, and also then you've got a customer dispute resolver in the form of an ombudsman. It's all asks. They ain't going to volunteer it, but that's what we've got to fight for.
Right, we're all back. So now I'm going to hand over to Sandra. Are you there? Firstly, can you hear me? If you're going to mute yourself in a minute. I'll introduce you to Sandra in a minute.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah.
Let me just put my video on.
Yeah, you can share the screen. Sandra's going to give a 20-minute session on addiction itself, therapy, etc. She's part of the Red Card team. So I'm going to hand over to you, Sandra, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to be talking about the personal responsibility aspects. Let me just share the screen. My screen, right? Share screen. And then, okay. Slideshow. Okay, is that clear?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to touch on a pathway model of problem and pathological gambling. I work with Tony. I think I've worked with Tony since the very beginning, actually, of when Tony set up Red Card.
Yeah.
And as we all know, we're not going to spend too much time on the definition of gambling and problem gambling, but two different, as we were talking, we can see that there's the issue of, do we ban, do we stop gambling as is, or actually we look at how we can, perhaps do what we're doing here with Red Card, which is raise awareness and educate people. Because ultimately, when you think about who is government, and any of us here could be in government. So it's really thinking about personal responsibility and lobbying and so forth. Yeah. So gambling is a decision to risk monetary bet on uncertain prospects of a larger financial gain. And in pathological gamblers, this decision is made repeatedly, compulsively, in the face of mounting debt and negative consequences, as we've been discussing and Tony's been sharing. So we can see the effects of problem gambling, money problems, which we've kind of spoken about, emotional problems and isolation. The deeper you get into it, the deeper, the problems, physical and mental health, burnout. If you're constantly preoccupied, I think Tony has shared along his journey about how, his focus on the match, sort of deteriorated because he's thinking about, he's got to go and put a bet on, etc. An impact on children for those with families. I've never really shared this, Tony, but my dad actually was a gambler. My dad is all the way in Africa. And I do remember growing up, some stages of his life where he was, engaging in gambling. He took an early retirement, he took his pension early and, had a lump sum. And I just recall him blowing that. So sometimes, as a child, you're not really aware of what's going on, but you just know you're having difficulties at home. And so it has an impact on personal relationships, interpersonal relationships, physical and emotional abuse in relationships as well. Intergenerational trauma formation. So we'll see in certain parts of the world, you have drinking problems, such as if you look at the Aborigines in Australia, they have a lot of intergenerational trauma coming from behaviors such as gambling, drinking, and then it goes into, because it's sort of normalized within the context of the families, and it becomes a generational trauma perpetuating. So problem gambling and addiction. So an addiction is a state of being enslaved. And I think this is where the problem is, to a habit or practice or something that is psychologically or physically habit forming, such as narcotics. So to such an extent that its cessation causes severe trauma, giving over and surrender. And as we were talking earlier, I was thinking about, drugs as well. I think recently there's been a rapper who just died, and just thinking about the impact on his family, impact on his, relationships. And if we were to search deeper, probably there was a gambling, habit in there as well, in the midst of all the drugs and other addictions that were going on. So often some of these addictions don't just come on their own. Your gambling addiction, you end up drinking for some people. So it just becomes, with
that, Sandra, do you think there's a case? There's definitely a case for gambling addicts. I know I've spoken to a few that have been through this in terms of multiple addictions and cross addictions that they suffer during that journey.
Yeah, there is definitely some intersectionality with some of the habits, because if when we talk about things like the dopamine and serotonin and noradrenaline, when I get to that next slide, if you're on a down, you can then reach out for another substance to pick you up. So for some people, there's an overlap there where you are going to face multiple addictions versus the one addiction.
Yeah.
And so this is how addictions develop. And Tony's always put that beautifully in terms of just his testimony and his journey. So you've got here pleasure, memory created. So that buzz, the whole circle constantly repeats itself. And then when you have a negative emotion, you go into avoiding pain by, there's a craving that's created. And then you use that addictive pleasure experience. And it says you create new neural pathway, and then those pathways are strengthened the more you use it again. And then instinctive brain, convinced survival depends on that. So that's similar with drugs. You just have that constant going on in the brain where and then that addiction is created. So it's just really a vicious circle, starting from the sense that there is some kind of pleasure that's there. And I think we've already touched a bit on dopamine and which has an effect on the thinking pathways. And the next here, so in terms of psychological presentations, when we were doing the ABC, in terms of how people present, there's anxiety, a lot of panic, unsteadiness. I'm sure everybody knows how anxiety represents itself. So you're talking about jitteriness, panic, people going into all the hyperventilation and just really anxious. If you're owing people or if you've put a bet, there's a sense of restlessness constantly there with you. And then there's depression, obviously, depending on the outcomes. If the outcomes are positive, that doesn't really last long before you need another fix. So it's a constant, dipping up and down. And also there's suicide risks. It's interesting, when we were in another workshop, we were talking about how sometimes you present at your GP and very rarely will they ask about, gambling. And yet it's very prevalent in a lot of people that are presenting with anxiety, depression, and suicide risk, because if you're then owing a lot, or, there's family relationships that are strained, then that's a high risk of suicide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these three pathways. So you have your ecological factors, so availability and accessibility. So there's, that. If you're able to access, if you have the money, if you're pleasure seeking. And then you've got your emotional, so there's behaviorally conditioned gamblers. And then you've got your emotionally vulnerable gamblers. And these are people who perhaps from childhood, disturbed personalities, you've got risk-taking, boredom, mood disturbances, depression, anxiety, poor coping, problem solving, life stresses, substance use. So you've got people who fall into that category. And what happens is that they get into this cycle of gambling, and it's a kind of conditioning. And as you can see there, we've got the habituation and, the chasing, and that develops into problem gambling. And then that circle goes over and over. Then you've got your biological factors as well. So here you've got all the ecological factors on all three aspects, which is, the availability. And then you've got your emotional and biological vulnerabilities. Then you've got your emotional and biological vulnerabilities plus impulsive traits. So that goes on to the personality. So that's another aspect of, gambling addictions, where certain personality traits. So biologically vulnerable people, it's where you need that that kick, where the gambling actually brings about the increase in your serotonin levels. That's the hormone that you release for sleeping, eating, etc. And then you also got the dopamine, as we mentioned earlier, and the noradrenaline, which is has an effect on your mood. So all that comes into play during the process of gambling. And what happens is then you have that pattern again of habituation, which is then established. And then you get into that whole cycle of chasing wins, losses, and then, losing more than expected. And then that just becomes the whole vicious circle. So these are the three pathways where you've got the emotional vulnerability, biological vulnerability, and impulsive traits. And then that just creates the whole pattern. So that's just to kind of have an understanding of what's happening to us in terms of psychologically when we're engaging in addictive behaviors. So this can apply to other, addictions as well, whether it's eating disorder, addictions, drinking. This whole cycle can actually apply in there as well. So in terms of how we help in terms of psychological and counseling approaches, there are different approaches there that relate very much to the last slide in terms of what your psychologist will do a very thorough assessment. I mean, starting from birth, how you were born can be traumatic. I'm talking about whether you were born by cesarean section or normal delivery. That all has an impact if you see a psychiatrist. So all that is taken into account because it kind of feeds into it feeds into some of these the top emotional vulnerability or the development of personality. So that starting from that very time you're born, and then we talk about the environment in which you were born into. So the second bit, which is schema focused therapy, looks very much at the environment, how your own innate personality and how you were raised. So you could have been raised where gambling is quite normal in some communities, but then if your personality is an addictive personality as well, then that sort of compounds on the problem. And then if you're in a culture or an environment where it's considered norm, that also adds on to it. So there are different forms of therapy that, as a counselor or as a therapist or psychologist or psychotherapist, you would actually do a very thorough assessment so that you have an understanding that packages of care have to be very individualized for each person. And cognitive behavior therapy, and most of you are probably on the platform are aware that this is looking at beliefs, so cognitions. This is how your belief system have an impact on the repeated behaviors. And so it's really breaking it down and looking at, replacing some of the behaviors. It's a bit like, I'll give another example of an addiction that people may not often talk of as an addiction, which is belonging to a cult. People belong to a cult because there is something that is fed for them psychologically that they get from being part of that, no matter the evidence you provide for them that actually this is really harmful for you, but the beliefs are so entrenched. And so it's also similar to what happens with gambling. My chances are I am going to win. There's, a possibility that this time will be the time. And so people who belong in a cult have very similar pathways as well, that they get a buzz from there, even though it's very harmful for them. Some of them, to try and get out of there, it becomes very addictive. So I'm throwing in that to say, addictions are just, they're so broad, but it's the same type of patterns that are actually happening in some cases. And we have schema-focused therapy. So the schema-focused therapy is the one that I was speaking about earlier, where you're really looking deep down to childhood development and looking at the type of personality the person has. And the schemas are the sort of like the mother of beliefs that we develop. So if you have what we call an unrelenting standard, if you fall into gambling, you're probably going to be, holding a belief that I will win, and you constantly engaging and re-engaging in that behavior because there's something about, this belief that this time is going to be, I've got to do better than I did last time. So that's just an example of one of the schemas. And then there's also schemas about social isolation, for example, is one of them. If you have a sense that being part of a gang or belonging to people that are engaging in such a behavior, to feel a sense of belonging, you are going to actually continue to engage in these addictive behaviors. So those are, just two examples. We have about 16 schemas out there, and some of them vulnerability to harm. There's so many different schemas, but they all can actually play some. If you have an assessment to see which schemas you have, you can then find that actually some are prone to addictive behaviors. And then we have existential psychotherapy. This is more about the lived experience, exploring, obviously, if people are coming into into therapy, again, it's about matching the type of therapy that is suitable for the individual person. And existential therapy is looked at the lived experience. So you may explore issues around losses, belonging, what it means if they were to give up gambling. So that's integrated throughout the process of other therapies as well. And then, of course, motivational interviewing. If a person is not ready and does not see it as a problem, then we're not going to go very far. And I think that's the sticking point with addictions, where you cannot force therapy. I know, there are other addictions where people, I was watching recently Nick Cotton, the old clips where Dot Cotton shuts him in a room to do cold turkey. Now, if a person is not ready to give something up and they don't have a belief that actually this is harming them, then you still have a long journey. And that's where you come in with the motivational interviewing. And then you have other brief therapies such as solution-focused brief therapy. Systemic therapy is quite a key one, because that looks at systems. So it might not just look at family systems, but it can also look at communal systems. If you're in a place where I think all of you have been talking a lot about football, that's systemic. The system within that allows for gambling to take place. It's almost normalized. So you'd have to look at the system in which the person is actually placed. So if they're working for a big firm in these financial firms where certain types of behaviors are part of the culture, you have to look at the system. So systemic therapy looks at a system. Systemic therapy also allows for people to come in with their families. So if it's a family matter and people are going through difficulties with their families, then you actually have to approach it from a systemic place, because if the wife is the one that's facilitating and enabling the gambling to continue, that needs to be looked at. Oh, sorry, Martin.
Yeah, thanks. I was interested in that. A particular hobby horse of mine is the effectiveness of treatment. And whenever I get up and ask this question to the great and the good, I always get a woolly answer. So I'm not looking to put you on the spot necessarily, but like to share your perspective. If I talk to Henrietta Bowden-Jones and say, how effective is your treatment, London Problem Gambling Clinic? I think she will generally say, I think it's probably 70% after a year, 70% success after a year, from the limited amount of interviews we've been able to do with some of our past patients. I was reading a paper from the residential course at Gordon Moody, which looked at data over a 4-year period, and that identified that there was approximately a 50% dropout rate, either self-selected dropout by the patient or invited to leave by the course because there was some issues. So that gives me this sort of 50 to 70% success rate. I've got no scheme of how that's being applied to various severities of PGSIs from 8 up to 20. And the big unknown to me is what on earth is GamCare and friends doing. They did publish through Gamble Aware a performance for a year, but I was very uncomfortable with the way they presented their statistics. They first of all said, okay, of all the people, and I think they had something like 40,000 calls, and then about 9,000 odd, 9,008 from memory, people who entered treatment, but only 69% finished treatment. So they analysed outcomes against that 69%, and only 23% of 69% ended up as non-gambler. 40% of 69% ended up with PGSIs of greater than 8 and still in the problem gambling status, and they justified that as a success because they probably started as an average of 20 on the PGSI. So I'm really confused about which treatment therapies are most suited to which levels of PGSI or alternative measure, and what does success look like. So that's probably a bit of a splurge, really, but I'd be interested on your thoughts on that.
Okay, I think that's a very good, point to make, because if we take the Alcoholic Anonymous approach of the fact that actually you are likely to always be a gambler as such, but it's talking about harm reduction. We're talking about reducing the engagement. So in my view, I tend to think about, by the time a person comes to see you in therapy, how long have they had this problem? And if somebody has had a problem for 10 good years of gambling, it's a very lengthy time to, I appreciate, Henrietta and them are working in the NHS sort of 6 sessions, 8 sessions. But if you look at it from a place where people have actually engaged in this habit, it's become part of them, it's ingrained in them. So I'm not talking, sort of short-term therapy for a lot of people. Even if you go into, sort of centers similar to detox or rehab, I believe this is a lifetime journey for a lot of people. That's my view. So I take more the American approach that therapy is a lifetime, you eat and feed yourself 3-4 times a day. You do other things, you engage in spiritual activities on a, regular basis. What more, where there's integral part of your being, which is, your emotions, your cognitions, that needs attendance, beyond just a sort of 16 session and move on. And then to me, that actually creates a lot of frustration for people when we talk about dropouts, when you talk about, because you're not staying with them in the journey of the struggle that they have. I tend to be more of an existential psychotherapist. So I'm staying with people, with them throughout their journey. I'm not saying, I'm not really in favor of prescriptive CBT 12 sessions, 10 sessions, because this is a lifetime journey. A person who, if Tony is sharing his story of when he started gambling and how long it lasted, to expect somebody is to actually set them up for failure, and actually you're feeding more into their negative cognitions about themselves. They're already coming with a problem where they're saying, I struggle with this. And then you're saying, well, after 12 session, either you're a dropout or you've been unsuccessful in therapy. But actually, I don't think there should be a cutoff like that, because that's feeding more and more into those schemas that people are bringing into therapy. But that's my view. Other people may have a different view about, the approach. So I'm not really great fan of, the sort of statistics of recovery. It's all good for using them for seeking funding and all that. But when it comes to the meeting of therapy, I think, a person's journey, I would say it's actually a lifetime project. But that's me.
Really interesting.
And do you know which of those, if any of them, that GamCare use as their model?
There probably is it CBT, Tony? Come in on that one. GamCare?
Yeah, I think GamCare generally use CBT. CBT is generally the most common form of therapy for gambling addicts. Obviously, we're going to later on, when we finish off on the slides, we will have other forms of therapy. We talk about recovery is not one size fits all. It's different for everybody. So when you say long-term therapy, whether it's year, 2 years, 5 years, I know I've heard about people being in therapy for years. I've heard about that, but for some, obviously they can overcome it, in a shorter time than others, put it that way.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, if we put it that way, then, but I think what I'm not for is the language of actually, when we talk about people failing or, dropping out, it's actually having to understand that, the relapses are part of the journey, rather than burdening people with the sense that they have failed. So this is what to expect from therapy, an assessment. to find out the extent of the problem, which is what we're talking about, Martin. If this problem has existed for such a long time, generally, even when I'm working with people who are not presenting with addictions, but just general, anxiety, and they come to me and say, since I was 11, so from 11 till 33, you've had this problem, and you want to come to me for 12 sessions, which is, sessions are 50 minutes. So 12 sessions is barely half a day of therapy to fix a problem that's been around for 11 years. So that's where I say you've got to really, help people to understand that this is a journey. So I have people who come for therapy, they do dips. They might come for, 6 months and then have a break and come back again. So, it's an ongoing, constant, support for them. And some people end up going to group therapy where, it's a different form of therapy. And then that's why you have there where it says personalized therapy intervention, and always holding the unconditional positive regard, which is a place where there's a non-judgmental empathic understanding, where you are saying to the person, the struggle is real, and not to put an extra burden by saying, well, 6 months down the road, if you're not recovered, let's move on. And this is how families can help the person with making some changes. The same as the professionals, understanding this, that the stages of change and work with them. So if we think about motivational interviewing, there is contemplation, pre-contemplation stages where a person is not ready or they're not sure how they're going to cope. And I think there is something about learning to replace addictive, harmful behavior with less behaviors. Human beings are prone to engaging in some form of addiction, even people who are religious. That can be very, an addictive form of practice. So to leave people with a vacancy there can also create problems. This is when, if you think about alcohol, where, or drugs, where you might replace it with a more acceptable chemical whilst you're weaning them off the actual harmful chemical. And then also expect ownership and accountability from gamblers. I think that's the one that we were talking about earlier about enabling. What are we as family doing, as hard as it might be? Sometimes we have to be really tough with our boundaries, and then restoring trust, and then, obviously getting help. So that's what I have to share. And back to Tony.
You stop sharing, yeah? Yeah, thank you. That's better.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. Thank you for that. Really, really insightful. And yeah, it's taught me one or two things, because when I think about a gambler's journey, the word that you use there, I think majority of us and people that I've met within, within the gambling circles, all that is the relapse word, which is why, yeah, when you talk about long-term therapy, and we're going to go into slides when we finish off about commitment and committing to therapy, being committed to that. We know it's long-term, it's not a short-term fix. So yeah, I'm sort of on your page in terms of, yeah, it has to be committed, it has to be long-term. I don't know if anyone else that's been through therapy, I know, Colin, you work in the NHS. I don't know what you think about the therapy side of things. It's different for everybody, I would have thought. Colin? Owen?
I'm going to say, I think you got the wrong person.
I meant Owen. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, thank you for. It's good to be here, and thank you for your presentation, Sandra. I'm someone who's experienced therapy long term, over 16 years. I've engaged in drug, alcohol, and gambling treatment for over 16 years, provided by both the NHS and third sector, engaging in CBT, MI, psychodynamic therapy, and I now work in treatment. And it's really interesting because from what I've observed in the past few months is people's level of complexity. So people are presenting with gambling issues, but alongside that, gambling is just a component of the challenges that they have. There might be complexity and comorbid issues that they're also dealing with. So that adds complexity to the picture, but also people's motivation. We're talking about the use of MI to motivate people to get to a certain place where they can take action. I think I really do see people's there's been quite a big range in people's motivation to really engage in therapy at different points. You know, there's always risk of people dropping out. I often do wonder how we can continue to, I don't know, engage people, engagement more, work towards improving engagement more. I don't know. It's right. There's a lot of questions, and in terms of the provision of so many CBT sessions, I think there is an emerging space now with regards to aftercare. So after a few sessions, it's not a case of you've done your 8 sessions and that is it. There is a consideration of how we can continue to help that person and post treatment, in aftercare. Because we do recognise that there is people's journeys are individual and very unique and very different to themselves. Some people might just benefit from a quick dose of CBT, and that's all they might need. But others, like myself and others, need longer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've added value, but it's been a really interesting discussion.
No, you have, Owen, because that's what I was thinking about in terms of it's different for some people and some people's, where they are on that journey of gambling addiction. For some people, that 12-week session of CBT might put them in a place where they feel, right, I can move on now. And then for others, it's not the same. Yeah, and I think, Sandra, you talked about.
So for some people, residential is necessary.
Yes, I've spent 20 months in a residential, and I felt I needed that, and not many people have that opportunity. We all know that Tier 4 residential treatment is, like with everything, is just being throttled with finances and money. And if a person has primary gambling issues, then it's even worse for that individual, because the opportunities for Tier 4 residential treatment is far less than if you had a drug or alcohol issue.
Cheers, Owen. Anyone else want to comment on Sandra's presentation before we move on to the last few slides? Right, thanks again. Colin. Sorry, not Colin. Martin.
Yeah, I'll just give you my perspective. My son committed suicide in 2015 at 23, and this gambling story is fairly typical. I mean, I think he started gambling in A-levels and obviously had a big early win. And my mental model of it is he must have got a big buzz, dopamine buzz early on, and then went on to reinforce that, unbeknown to us, and got to the stage where he became addicted, either at school or as soon as he got to university, where he obviously then blew his first term's grant, and then the cycle started. And obviously when we had to come and step in because he was skint in week 1, we ensured that he went to some counselling at university, which I believe was probably CBT, but the issues with that were, one, you have to wait for 10 or 12 weeks for it to start, and then it is a compact period of a course of 6, 8, 10 weeks. I can't remember what it was now. Anyway, we helped him through university. He was doing a maths degree. He was a bright guy, but he never got over his gambling problem, and it would he would find ways around. In those days, it was pre-GamStop, GamBan, and some of the bank blockers. We attempted to block his computer, but as soon as he started working, he was on a smartphone with one of the big 4 accounting firms, and he had various relapses. So he then eventually got self-referred on to London Problem Gambling Clinic and did another session of 8, give or take, CBT type lessons, and that had some benefit for a short term, but he relapsed again, and we eventually ended up paying him to go to a hypnotherapist in Harley Street. So I think those were all sessions of CBT which didn't work for Josh. So I would like to see the sort of banner up there saying, don't assume treatment's going to work, because it won't. And I think there are similarities between Josh and I know a lot of other parents of gambling suicides, and they all have a similar profile. They're all young guys who are pretty bright, very personable, life and soul of the party, but they got this buzz through dopamine or whatever, and couldn't shake that off. And they all eventually got to the point where they felt the world would be a better place without them. So, yeah, when I look at treatment, I look at the providers. NHS has got its problems. NHS has got no nice guidelines. Why the hell not? It's got no proper triage between NHS and GamCare and its 12 or 13 partners. Why the hell not? There's no simple, and it may be because there is no simple solution, but to a parent, you'd love to say, okay, from what I can see, my son has got a PGSI of 16 or 20 or 30. What's the most appropriate form of treatment for him? That route map isn't there. And although NHS is coming up with another 12 or 14 clinics, I've not seen their strategy written down anywhere apart from 5 lines in the 10-year NHS plan. And you know, to me as an engineer, looking at it as a project, I'd be saying, okay, we've got 340,000 problem gamblers. If we're going to treat these, let's assume we're going to tackle 20 or 30% a year. So the capacity I need is X. How many does a clinic get through? I've no idea. My fag packet suggests 1,000 a year might be what Northern Problem Gambling Clinic and London Problem Gambling Clinic get through, maybe a few more if it's online. So that then defines how many clinics you need, and you can look at the prevalence through UK and see what the geographical spread needs to be. So the whole of the treatment scenario is a bit like a Swiss cheese to me. It's full of holes, and it needs somebody to step up to the plate. For the sake of argument, let's call him Matt Hancock, and get a grip. It may be that the Public Health England report on gambling related harm, which was due out in spring 2020, may actually arrive May 2021. If it does, that may give us a better view of the landscape. But at the moment, the landscape is pretty depressing. Sorry for the rant.
Yeah, go on, Clifton. Firstly, Clifton, I just want to thank Martin for sharing that, because I know not everybody on the call knows his story, but thanks, Martin. Go on, Clifton.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a pleasure to listen to Martin Jones, because it was Joshua Jones that inspired me to do what I'm doing today. I remember seeing the article. Wow. And my first event I did at school last year, Joshua was the main pinup boy that I was trying to explain to the PSHE class of 90 students. And so listening to your testimony tonight is just vindicated the work I'm doing. I listened to Sandra's therapy. The route I want to take is probably more passionate in a spiritual sense because of the inspiration of Joshua. But obviously we live in a politically correct age, and it's a bit of a blocker. So I wouldn't give up hope. I'm here tonight because of your son, and my whole career is moving in a different direction because of your son. And hopefully we'll reach a lot more youngsters that never find themselves in the same situation Joshua found himself in. And I always say to people, no amount of money is worth taking your life for. No amount of money is worth taking your life for. You've got to be able to speak to somebody about it and get through it. And if you relapse, you still need to be accepted if you relapse along the way, because life's a long time. We all make mistakes. Things happen. And sometimes we duck into situations, but, you know, for the loss of your son tonight, I could tell you, it was him that got me doing what I'm doing today. So, you know, I just want to pay tribute to you for being on here tonight, and Phil for what you're doing as well. So.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it. There's just perhaps one other point I'd throw into the mix, really, that if you read any press article or look at any media program, and I've been on a few from time to time, they always latch on to the biggest sum of money they can possibly justify and defend. In Josh's case, they will often quote 30,000. In Josh's head, you know, and we'd shared this with him, it was far from that. From his mindset, if he's got a load of debt and 100 quid, he'll bet the 100 quid, because a load of debt plus 100 quid is no different to a load of debt. And in the event, he blew his month's salary and probably £1,000 annual bonus. So the amount he died for was about 2,500 quid. And that's pitiful. You know, we could fund that 10, 100 times over, you know, but it eats the brain away.
Can I ask one serious question as well while you're on this? Sorry, Martin. How do you react to the adverts when you see adverts coming on, whether it's on, how do you and your wife react to when you see gambling adverts?
Well, when the fun stops stop or tap out to bet out, they're not safer gambling adverts. They're gambling advertorials, if you like. In terms of gambling ads, they don't eat away at me because I'm not a gambler. You know, they're just more crap that's brainwashing society and brainwashing children in particular. What does get to me is when you hear politicians or BGC getting up and say gambling is safe, harmless fun to the majority of people. Gambling kills.
Exactly. Thanks, Martin.
Tony, you okay me jumping in? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I've been quite quiet for the whole session, just listening in and, you know, taking in the information. So Martin, thank you for sharing your story. I'm really sorry to hear about your loss. I can't even imagine what that's like, to be honest. One thing that's affected me today is I will never look at a gambling advert the same way ever again. So that's definitely impact on me. In terms of what we were saying about moving forward, the way I see it is we live in a quite a capitalist system. So obviously gambling, is financially motivated and it's linked to policy. So change will take time. I mean, I get a little bit cynical myself and I get quite down looking at the situation, but I try to look at what little change I can do in my own small environment. If I can change one person's life or one family's life in a positive way, because unfortunately, I think policy will take quite a while to change, and it is very sponsorship led, which, you know, makes, you know, there's various barriers there. And the other thing I'm really hoping for, I think Owen touched upon it earlier, is there was about, you know, you have these like respite locations. I don't know what the terminology is, to be honest, but relocation centres where you can go for various months or weeks. There's none of that really I've seen in the UK, which is a shame, or very little, and it's very hard to access. We don't have the money in the first place, and obviously gambling is financially motivated, so that will take time to change. So so I try looking in terms of my own small environment, what I can change. Otherwise I beat myself up about it. But so again, Martin, thank you for sharing the story, and I'm really sorry to hear about your loss.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks,
thank you very much, Martin, for, you know, being open and just sharing that journey. And thank you, Clifton, as well, for coming in and just sharing what your journey is starting with regards to, you know, reaching out to young people. And you mentioned that spiritual component. I think it's very integral, even when we're thinking from an existential therapy, you know, spirituality cannot be left out. This is not talking about religion. This is actually talking about your values, your beliefs, and all that. So it's something that really needs to be looked at as part of the whole treatment package, because it's easy to say, you know, people will not recover, but I think we are missing out on elements of, you know, who human beings are by sort of being politically correct in some ways. So I'm hoping that your work will actually flourish and continue. And just to add that, you know, talking about young people, I think Tony and I did a presentation at a Jewish school in Bournemouth some time ago, and we had young people come up actually talking about how much they're spending. We're talking 16, 17-year-olds who are talking about thousands. So there is a lot in terms of responsibility on our part in terms of just reaching out and doing more of this work to target, to catch them young, so to speak. Because if in Tony's case, had he been caught at that age as well, that would have had an impact and change. So it's looking at systems, school education systems, and really getting in there. And also from what you shared, Martin, systemically, these companies perpetuate some of these, you know, behaviors in young people, especially when you talk about, you know, the big financial companies where we're talking about they're investing your money, but actually there is an element of gambling within that systemic place as well. So there's quite a lot that we have a responsibility to think about how we intervene and how we map this out and how we influence policy. So thank you very much for sharing, Martin.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Yes, and that's one, just to say, that's one of the reasons why we highlight suicide in our workshops, because it's not highlighted enough, it's not talked about enough. People are still a little bit, you know, taboo about it. But as Martin said, you know, we have to seriously keep highlighting and raising awareness that gambling actually does take lives, and it's a fact. So yeah, we will move on to the last few slides. I know it's late, so different types of deceit. Just quickly, this is a different form of how it affected others. Gabby Stone, 34, admitted fraud by abuse of a position. Stone's friends and family repaid the Milton Keynes-born athlete in full as he sought to stop gambling. But in a victim impact statement read to the court, Mr. Rivers said, "The thought that someone who had been responsible for a large part of my life and someone I would put my trust in to handle a major source of my income had been dishonest has left me feeling sick." And it's just an example of how it affects others and how people stay in denial. So this has had a massive impact on Greg Rutherford, and obviously it's someone, we talk about betrayal and trust, and this will happen all over the country with friends and families, etc., where lying and deceit and the betrayal of trust will always happen. And unfortunately for this gentleman, he just couldn't open up about his gambling, and obviously Greg Rutherford was unfortunately one that was impacted on. And when we talk about all various different types of gambling, we'll go through these very briefly because we've touched upon a lot of them. And that's what I wanted to say from the outset about gambling addiction in general and gambling harm, because generally speaking, most people will automatically think about the monetary side of it. But as we've touched upon tonight, there's so many different elements to gambling addiction. And it's important that we talk about this and we highlight the different types of harm. We talked about suicidal ideation, ongoing guilt and shame. That's something that, you know, the problem gambler will always have. Ongoing increased risk of disease or detriment to health, reduced engagement in cultural rituals, so that could be going to church or the mosque, etc. So there's a massive issue within different communities, and that's a cultural issue. That's something that I'm going to be working with in the future. Life course, things happen in life, homelessness, incarceration, change of career, that can drive you to gambling. So if you change your career, you might, I don't know, you might be on 30 grand a year less, and you've got to make all that money, and unfortunately you might think gambling is the way, which is not. It leads to incarceration, obviously going to jail, and homelessness. Homelessness is something that I think a lot of gamblers, all the problem gamblers that I've spoken to, ex-gamblers, have suffered of some form of eviction or repossession of the house, etc. I'm fortunate that when I lost my 2 houses, that I've got a big family where I could actually have that support. But for many, if they get evicted from a council flat, etc., they will end up homeless. Neglected absence from schoolwork. We talked about productivity. So whether that's students, whether that's school children, or in the workplace. So in gambling addiction, that's how it affects productivity. Because for me, for instance, as Sandra said earlier, when I'm going out in my 9-year career onto the pitch, and I'm thinking about gambling, not all the time, but obviously it passes through the mind from time to time, and my mental health is struggling because I've got all these debts, and I'm wondering if I can pay the mortgage on Monday. And when the bailiffs are turning up, etc., I've had experiences of where I've got up outside my house one morning, I've gone out to get into the car and there's no car there. And then I've quickly remembered that I'm about 6 payments behind with the car and the car's been repossessed. You know, these are horrible, horrible incidences that happen. So yeah, impact criminal record. You know, I've spoken to people that have gone to prison committing crime. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, about when you've exhausted all avenues of borrowing, sometimes ultimately the last chance saloon is going to be crime. You know, are you going to commit that big fraud or that big robbery or whatever it might be to get yourself out of jail? And unfortunately, some people will go down that road and end up in jail. Erosion of savings. Yes, we talk about inheritance. Another thing when it comes to affordability checks with the Gambling Commission, we talk about people having access to money and what they're blowing. I talked about losing my car, I've lost 2 homes, homelessness, reliant on welfare and bankruptcy. My bankruptcy culminated in a £192,000 bankruptcy file when I finished football 5 years early at 30. So all these issues, and then you've got dishonest communication we just talked about, long-term damage or estrangement, and obviously relationships, and risk of DV, which is obviously domestic violence. And you know, that's again something that is not particularly highlighted enough yet. At this time now, with people gambling online, stuck indoors, there'll be relationship breakdowns, there'll be arguments, there'll be abuse, there'll be domestic violence, and really something that is, you know, probably going forward, it needs to be highlighted more. So as I said, there's a whole realm of issues, and when you look at all those different types of harm, you know, I would probably say that majority, nearly all of them, that I would have experienced, and probably people on this call would have experienced. So yeah, it's a massive issue. We're not going to go too much about this. Estimated to be 2 gambling-related suicides a day in Great Britain. Gamble Aware research. 1 in 5 problem gamblers thoughts about suicide in the past year. 1 in 20 problem gamblers has made a suicide attempt in the past year. Here's some more stats through Gambling with Lies, Our Friends, and Gamble Aware. And when you look at these stats, it just goes to show that, you know, it really does need highlighting more. You know, there may be figures out there and research out there about gambling related deaths, but you know, in my mind, there's probably a hell of a lot more. You know, there needs to be a lot more data. You know, the coroners need to get on board, a lot more data about, you know, what people actually died of. It may not be put down as gambling related death, but there'll be thousands that would have been related to gambling. 40% gamblers seeking treatment had suicidal thoughts. 20% of gamblers seeking treatment had attempted suicide. Problem gamblers are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than any other addiction, and that's something really important to highlight. This is just a quick, very, very quick case study. Supermarket manager Mr. Tollington was addicted to slot machines until his girlfriend left him. Mr. Tollington hanged himself after leaving a note saying, "I'm sorry for the gambling. It was my biggest regret." He would squander up to £1,000 a time playing betting slot machines. This is a case where the message should go out that gambling is as punishing and as fatal as other addictions and can bring nothing but misery, and in many cases, tragically death. So it's so important that, you know, we'll continue to highlight suicide within gambling. And I think we're going to be meeting with a lot of councils in the future in terms of mental health agencies, Mind, etc. And I think this is something that going forward, hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, this is something that will be a big part of gambling education. Sandra, we've already been through. Women gamble, I'll touch upon shortly because I'm mindful of time. Women gamble again, something that's grown over the last few years. Rates of gambling have gone from 65% 2007. Women gambling reporting gambling problems has risen by 1/3 since 2013, more than double the rate of men. When I think about gambling in the 90s and I go into the bookies, yeah, I wouldn't see a woman for sure. Times has changed. Obviously, technology has come in now. We've got online gambling, etc., and the advertising. So we're in a completely different space when it comes to, you know, the gender of gambling. You know, it's not a male-dominated industry at all. You know, I was on a meeting not so long ago with the APPG where I listened to 5 ladies' personal stories about their gambling harm, and it was really, really, really powerful. And that just shows how many women out there are suffering gambling harm, either individually or as an affected other. Women gamble for different reasons. The men, escapism, boredom, stress, blocking out feelings. More likely to gamble on bingo, slots and scrap cards. It is more common for women to be affected others than men, which is likely because of a more significant male gambling population and a higher ratio of heterosexual relationships, leading to more female spouses and partners being affected. This is just a quick case study of a lady who suffered through gambling addiction. Alison had her children quite young. Her husband earned a good wage, travelled a lot as he worked in sales. The responsibility of raising small children, often solo, weighed heavily on Alison, and she started playing harmless games online. She had soon racked up 40,000 of debt, all without the knowledge of her husband. Again, denial and hiding, lying, deceit, not telling her husband. It all came to a head when the bailiffs came calling over Sunday lunch while her in-laws were in attendance. She recalls, "I got found out in the most devastating way. It's taken 3 years to begin to pay back my debt and rebuild my marriage. We have no computers, laptops, or smartphones in the house. I have an ancient flip phone with no internet. But if I see an advert on television, I still get that familiar itch." So I'm not going to play this short video because I think I'm mindful of time, but this was obviously a lady here who had been through gambling addiction. We're talking about self-regulation. So we talked about recovery with Sandra, and as I said before, you know, it is different for everybody. Not one size fits all. People will go to GA, people will go to therapy, people will go to counselling, residential, all different types. So I think it's an individual thing, and it's what suits someone best. What is it that makes them feel more comfortable in their recovery journey? So, but I do think that as individuals, when you start on that gambling journey or you see yourself getting into problems, there's enough out there self-regulation wise where you have to take some responsibility. I talked earlier to various people about the blame culture going on within the industry, but as an individual, for, you know, and for some, unfortunately, the addiction is too much to cope with. So we're all different. We're all built different. We're all different characters. We're all different makeup. So some people cope with trauma different than others, and some people are stronger mentally than others. So we're all different. That's what we have to remember. But self-exclusion is something that you can do yourself, as it says here. You can also self-exclude from young local bookmakers. This is called area exclusion. So not just the bookers down the road, but you can self-exclude from bookers within that area. And you've also got online self-exclusion, GamStop. This will enable you to self-exclude yourself from most online gambling sites, but not all. And we say most because obviously there are unregulated sites out there. But all online gambling sites are required to join the scheme as part of their GC license conditions, LCCPs. So this is something that, you know, according to the latest research that I've been reading, whether it's true or not, we don't know, it's debatable, but GamStop have 200,000 registered, signed up to their app. So that's a hell of a lot. I'm not sure if I actually believe that's the amount, but that's a hell of a lot. So that's a tool that's out there that can help. Self-exclusion for bingo halls and arcades as well. Self-exclude from licensed bingo premises and arcades with this messaging in person, although there's a link Gamble Aware website that may you allowed to exclude online. Casinos, so you've got the Sense, which is self-enrollment national self-exclusion scheme, which allow you to self-exclude from all land-based casinos. Casinos was the biggest downfall for me in terms of my gambling addiction. And this is the most important thing. Sandra talked about earlier about being ready. And I think that is definitely the case. You have to be ready. You know, it's no good going to a session and then dropping out after a week. You have to be ready and you have to be committed. So ultimately, the decision to enter gambling premises or access an online gambling where you have self-excluded or yourself is entirely yours. So if you're self-excluded, you must mean it. And I think that can only come within. Who else can help? So we have 3 slides left, so we're nearly done. We talked earlier about interventions. I think about my managers, for instance. I did have, my form was sporadic, to say the least. Mental health issues going on, not sleeping, anxiety, mood swings in the change room, mood swings at training, etc. But if there was better education for all these people in a position of authority, like managers and coaches and teachers and parents, etc., then I think this is what we have to look at in terms of intervention, so that more and more people.
Tony,
Yes.
can I just
Yes,
jump
Sandra?
in quickly? I just wanted to jump in quickly with one very strong emotion that we also need to be mindful of is shame. Shame traps people into, it's a very, very powerful emotion when it comes to gambling addictions, because you're talking about, this whole sense of negative perception of self, and then getting again caught up in wanting to cover up the shame. So if you lose money, there is that shame, and then you want to. So I just wanted to, you know, highlight that comes a lot, because if you're thinking about suicide, shame plays a big role in it. So for people to be very mindful when you're dealing with that emotion where a person is struggling with gambling.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's definitely true. Shame and guilt, they're two things that people get wrapped up in. They find it very, very difficult to come clean to family and friends. You know, I know I felt a bit of shame in terms of my co-players. So for instance, if there was a night out, which is a regular thing on a Wednesday night, it's a players' night out, the amount of times that I would cancel, you know, make up an excuse in line because I'm shameful of what I've done with money and blew my wages and I can't afford to go out. So shame, it does ingrain itself in you. Yes, it's a really good point. It's part of a gambler's journey, shame and guilt. And
Tony.
Yes, mate.
Tony, when I mean, I got emotional when Martin was talking, actually. But when Martin was talking and he was talking about money, I nearly spoke up there. Now, for me, it's more about the embarrassment. So Sandra's just highlighted the same thing. Really, it's shame, embarrassment, and them emotions take over the money side.
Yeah. So that embarrassment linked to shame, you know, stops a lot of people, like, as you say, you know, whether it's going public or whether it's just to friends and family.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Yeah, exactly. Cheers, Mark.
Just one last thought on that, and if you look at the wider public, I still don't think there's an understanding of a gambling addict if you take it in comparison to drinking and drugs, etc. So I think that only highlights even more the shame and the embarrassment side.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've always said that, you know, this is an addiction that, as crippling as it is, and the amount of lives it ruins and all that, it still needs highlighting. It still needs more awareness. It still needs people to talk and you know, share their journeys, etc. You know, that's the only way we can go in terms of reducing gambling harm, because we can't. I'm talking about intervention here, and as we've said here, all these people in these positions can help, you know, if they're educated. But also the bottom one I've put in red, obviously, and that's why I say we can't rely on the industry. You know, the industry is a profit run business, so we can't rely on the industry to protect you know, whether that's you know, intervention when as an online gambler, you know, whether that's putting more money into education awareness, lots of different issues that related around the industry that we can't rely on. That we have to come up with our own solutions or to help reduce gambling harm. We don't know what's going to happen with the Gambling Act. We don't know. We're not hopeful in terms of any robust changes happening. So I think individually and collectively, we keep highlighting gambling addiction, gambling awareness, keep educating people, and also as an individual and in people in certain positions, keep educating them so they can be aware of how to intervene. Because as I said, the government, we can't rely on them for protection. Components, Sandra mentioned it earlier, and this is really important in terms of, as it says here, determination. You've got to be committed. You're not going to wake up one morning and think, oh, I'm not going to gamble anymore. It's a long journey. You have to be fully committed. You need support, you need professional help. And that's why it says taking action and then maintaining that action. And when we talk about maintaining and achieving the goals and working to maintain, that's more or less what Sandra's saying. It's a long-term project. You know, you might be going on a 12-week session or a 3-month session, but you still have to maintain it. And it might be year 2, 3, 4, 5 years that you're going through therapy or going through counselling. Lots of people do. But what it will lead to is a better life, stress-free, mentally stable, healthy, happy, and financially stable. That's what eventually it will lead to, because, you know, I can speak from experience. That's what it's led me to over the last 6 or 7 years to where I am today, to be in this position. And that takes a long time. And I've had to go through counselling, but I've had obviously my faith on a personal level. I've had family support. So yeah, it takes, you know, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 things to get to a place where, you know, as it says here, you've got a better life. But you have to mean it. You have to be committed, and you have to take action. And as difficult as that is, you know, we always say that a gambling addict is so hard to stop. And it is so hard to stop, you know, but you have to find the strength and courage, and with a bit of support, you know, I'm testament. There's others that are testament that it can be done. So yeah, there's hope out there for everybody.
Tony, can I just touch upon that?
Yeah.
So in terms of what you were saying, that and what Sandra said about relapse, yeah, that is very common. There's some research which has come out recently. I think it was on the BBC a while back, saying that the neurological pathways for gambling is stronger than a lot of other addictions and drug misuse. So it's very natural for relapse to occur. But unfortunately, because you know, culture and society, we don't see gambling as a big issue. So it's just about educating the population that it's a very, very systemic issue, and especially because it's invisible. So you, for example, like I said, if you're a back in the day football player, you might have been, you know, on the football pitch very strong, in the dressing room a strong character. It's not visible. It's about showing that it's underneath. That neurologically is a very, very, very strong issue. But it's going to take time, I think, to obviously for the public to learn.
Yeah, it's going to take time, and I think you're right in terms of not being recognised. In terms of alcohol and drugs, I think we're getting there. I think we're slowly getting there in terms of you know, gambling addiction being recognised as the most escalated addiction of all. So hopefully in the coming year or two, people will start to realise. And I think the more work like this and the more research and more education awareness that's done, the more highlighted in the media, then eventually, you know, we'll get to a point where people will start to realise and say, you know, when we talk about addictions, it won't be drugs and alcohol that will become first off the tongue. It'll be gambling addiction. And the research and evidence is out there. The figures are out there, and they continue to rise, particularly with online gambling. So yeah, we'll get to that point where, you know, people will respect gambling addiction as they should.
And it's interesting that it's with time it morphs and comes in different ways. You know, as you're talking about women, you know, with access to gambling privately. You know, in a previous session, we're talking, and I was saying it's interesting now we've got this Bitcoin business that's come up as well, and how that's, you know, another form of gambling, but that's kind of come in another way. So it's just having our antennas quite alert that it's going to morph and come in different ways as well. Different ways,
yeah. Again, another these slides, by the way, the self-exclusion recovery toolkit slides will be sent to every participant, so don't worry about this. Most of them you will know these, but we've got blocking software, we've got therapy, as Sandra talked about. Again, here we talked about different forms of therapy and what suits people better than others. Talking, group therapy, GA, which is a lot. Some people prefer GA. You know, that's, and as I said, it's every individual is what suits you best. These will all be sent to you. Again, just the contact details for the self-exclusion. And so, where to go for help? Again, all these slides will be sent to you. I'm sure a lot of you know these agencies. And so, yeah, we get to the point where we have a short Q&A. I know there's been a lot of engagement, a lot of talking, a lot of questions. So I know it's late. I'm sorry that we have gone on late. We did start 15, 20 minutes late with the gremlins. But I will stop sharing this. I do appreciate everybody that's come on tonight, because obviously, you know, we all want to make gambling safer. We all want to make a difference in society. We all want to save lives. So I really appreciate every person that's come on this call tonight, because we did unfortunately get off to that bad start with the gremlins. But I've really enjoyed it. I love the fact that we engage and people are open up and talking about it. And again, thanks again to Martin. And I think more and more people should share their personal stories. I know it's hard, but it is powerful, and people do resonate with it. So if anyone's got any final questions, then we can wrap up. It's a late night. We all good?
Yeah, just want to say thank you.
Okay,
and also thank you to Dan Arthur as well for co-hosting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gurin. I'm going to stay on for 10 minutes anyway, like I always do. But once again, thanks to everybody. We'll have a workshop every month on Eventbrite, different topics. So thanks to every single one of you. I appreciate it. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good to see everyone. Speak soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Good night.
Cheers, guys.